All right. All right. TikTok, it's time to rock, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special episode here on the channel. We have a special guest. We have the usual culprits here. We have John. Good to see you, brother.
What's up?
Jimmy. You're in darkness, bro, but we can still see you.
Yeah. I figured I'd change spots. This is my basement, but you can see me okay though, right?
We can see you, brother. We can see you. The most important thing is that we can hear Jimmy. John, that's the most important thing, isn't it?
I have a lot of good stuff to say.
Good to see you guys. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. John, we've got a special guest here in the stream. Do you want to introduce us to our special guest, please, brother?
I sure do. We got a Van Halen nut here who's not just a regular ordinary nut. He likes to delve deep into stuff that nobody knows about or nobody's ever heard about. I mean, he's got some like really cool stuff here. He's going to talk tonight. We're going to dig into the 1984 album, not just the normal stuff that we talk about when we talk about 1984, but basically the recording and the production of it, that type of stuff, things that he's been able to like forensically find, these little clues and pieces of information that I mean, some of it's just pretty amazing. It's like, I never knew it. You know what I mean? Some of it I knew, and we discussed things back and forth, and some of it is theory, but some of it's fact too. I mean, that he's nailed down some pretty cool stuff. Right off the bat, before we introduce him, just the one thing was just like pretty cool. We're going to be talking a lot about Alex's drum set and stuff tonight, and he actually figured out that everybody thinks that, even myself, that on 5150, that album was all Simmons toms, but that was the difference between 1984, the drum sound, and 5150 album sounds. But I know just one song, there's a rototom on there on 5150, right? I mean, on Good Enough, and that I never knew that, and this guy figured that out there. He pinpointed it on there, and it's kind of pretty interesting that we all thought it was just all Simmons on there, but there was a rototom on there before he ditched them, I guess, right, Tanner? Anyway, yeah. Tanner Jordan is on, guys. He's our guest tonight, and
actually, it's right here if you look.
there you go. See, right over his shoulder, right? Yeah. So but he pretty much did ditch them, I guess, after that, the rototoms for 5150 album, right? That was really the only time. I don't know if you noticed it anywhere else on that album.
No, I haven't. I'm slowly isolating all with that AI kind of isolation stuff and kind of giving it an overview.
If anybody wants to listen, it's like 53 seconds into Good Enough. You'll hear
it's like 53.
Here we lose him. Anyway, Tanner's in Vermont, I think, right? And Jimmy's in Connecticut. I'm in Florida. And Andrew's in New Zealand. So we're all over the place. He's frozen on there. He's back now. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm back.
Anyway, so we're going to be discussing the 1984 album, like a little more in depth than about production tonight than we usually talk about these things. So anyway, Tanner, you want to give us a little lowdown? Jimmy, you had a good question for him.
Yeah. Before I was asking, Tanner looks pretty young, so I wanted to find out how he got into Van Halen, because usually younger kids are listening to some other band.
So I'm 22 now, but when I think I started, I was like 14 or 15, and my dad was kind of a guitar nut, and he was like, "I'm gonna give you a list of like 10 guitarists. You got to check them all out. If you want to play guitar, you got to know these guys." So he gave me like Randy Rhoads and Michael Schenker and all these guys, and Eddie was one, and we sat there and watched a couple like live videos. We probably watched a few of the like probably a clip of Live Without a Net, Eruption or something like that, and I just was like, holy crap. So I think I went home and slowly kind of listened to more and more stuff. I think I obviously started with Eruption and then like moved to more stuff, and then slowly like I got into the actual guitar building thing. So then I started joining all those Facebook groups, EVH Guitar Building Database and Frankenstein replicas and stuff. And I've pulled away from those because they are full of those scammers that constantly post t-shirts and stuff like that. But I still keep in contact with the the guys that I met on there.
Cool, man.
And what about drums? You there?
He's frozen.
Yeah.
He's back.
What about the drum part of it?
The drums are actually a recent thing. I got a drum set and got into like more Led Zeppelin kind of stuff for a bit, and then finally kind of realized that the drums have their own nuances just as Eddie's guitars do. So I got kind of sick of playing guitar. I still play guitar quite a bit, but lately I've been kind of all drums, and it's been fun. It's more expensive. Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So like you and I have been talking for a few weeks now about the 1984 album and stuff like that. When did you kind of zone in on that album? Is that your favorite album, or is that
Mostly when I posted that Facebook post a few weeks ago about the Alex Van Halen's drum set, kind of mirroring and copying Bill Bruford's drums with the Rototoms and Simmons and stuff like that. Like I posted those, and then your comments and Alan's comments kind of encouraged me to like really nail down what he used on the album, because there's a lot of hearsay from Eddie, obviously, and Alex hasn't said too much about it, and so I just really wanted to, like, by listening and pictures and stuff, nail it down. So I started to look really deep into that.
So Bruford, what was that on, like, UK? Was that when he was using the
I don't remember when. He used Simmons for quite a while through the mid to late 80s, to almost replacing every single drum with Simmons, which kind of sounded like crap in my opinion.
So, I mean, when he probably first started using it, had to be around 80 or 81, I guess.
Probably.
Simmons drums probably, and I think like I think the UK album was probably like 79, 80 or something like that, maybe. And I know Eddie was big into this, so I'm sure Alex was big into it. Obviously, he was influenced by that too. And that whole era there, Terry Bozzio was another guy that was big into Simmons and stuff like that at the time. So, but I mean, obviously, Alex. Do you know when the first time Alex started using any Simmons? I know. What did you say? A piece of plywood.
The first time on an album, I believe, is "Push Comes to Shove" on Fair Warning. There's every fourth beat in it is you hear a doom, and it's like, I think it's an overdub. And he started putting it on his kit, I believe, in that time. There's like two way over to his right, and so I think that's when he started. That was probably the first time, and he was probably experimenting behind the scenes. But
and when he was triggering them, he was using like plywood. Is that what you said? Where the drum heads were?
For the bass drums, and that was for live. That's what I believe. I don't know who's there's a website called Alex Van Halen Drums, and it goes through every single drum set he's ever had, like through super detail. And that's what I read that said he would glue plywood to the back of his drum heads, and then that had the piezo that would trigger, because a Simmons pad is literally just plywood with riot shield material over it. And then under that is a piezo that lets the drum brain know when you hit it. And Eddie said that his wrists it killed his wrists to use them, because it was just like plastic. Wow. And you can hear it if you listen to the beginning of Hopper Teacher, the which we'll get into, about the motorcycle kind of intro. You can hear through the overheads and tom mics the clicks over the top of the Simmons. It's not just direct Simmons. You can hear like kind of clicks every few hits. It's kind of funny because it's literally just beating on plastic.
Right. And so when do you think the first time Alex was using the kicks live with the Simmons, triggering them? He was one of the first guys to do this, really, that I can ever remember. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Tanner's frozen again.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't know if you heard any of what I said, Tanner. When was the first time you think that Alex used the Simmons triggering for live?
I think it was Usfest, but I don't remember. I think he had him on his kit actually earlier than that. But when it comes to like a full tom and probably bass drum set. I think it was the Us Fest, because you like if you listen to like the Girl Gone Bad like snippet in between Somebody Get Me a Doctor, when him and Eddie are kind of like mirroring each other's stuff.
Right.
It's quite obviously Simmons by then.
Gotcha. Right, so let's jump into the album. Let's start. I mean, the instrumental 1984. I don't know, how much you've gotten into that. I know it was originally about 45 minutes long. Don Landy edited it down to the minute and 30 seconds or whatever it was, and that was done on the Oberheim OBXA, which is what Eddie used on Jump. Also, he used an OB8, which was the newer keyboard at the time. On I'll Wait, I actually have an OB8, and it's crazy. I got mine in about 1988, and I think I paid $800 for it in 1988,
Wow.
and it's worth like between $7 and $10 now if you look. Oberheim is back. They just recently released something called an OBX8. That's a new one that can do everything. Can do everything the OBXA and the OB8 did, and I think they're like $4 or $5 for those. But
Behringer is also working on a copy. Behringer makes all those copy synths, like Moogs and stuff like that, and they've been working on it for a while now. So everyone's kind of like, "What the hell's going on?"
A friend of mine bought the OBX8, and he loves it. He says they obviously it was Tom Oberheim. He still runs the company, and he said it's exact. The voices are exactly like the OBXA and stuff like that. A lot of people think the OBXA sounds a little bit warmer than the OB8. I think Eddie even thought so. I mean, I'll Wait. It almost sounds like there's some kind of like clipping going on. The keyboard part. When I listen to it, I don't think it sounds as warm as like the OB8 does in real life. I don't know if it was basically just Eddie turning knobs on that one. It's all analog, so it was just like playing around with that. But anyway, so 1984. The instrumental, that was pretty much just Don Landy edited that all together. I don't really, Eddie just noodling around for 45 minutes, and he just made it into a minute and 30-second piece of music. Obviously, it was a statement piece, I guess, because he just wanted people to know, make a statement that, this is where they were at then, and he was going to be playing some keyboards and stuff from then on, really more prominently. But then the next thing we jump into is Jump. And so, Tanner, we know Jump was the first song recorded for 1984 in April 1983. And that also the same night they did I guess I'm assuming it's what they used on the album. They just, overdubbed after that. But you and I have discussed, and in Ted Templeman's book, he says that Jump, I'll Wait, and Drop Dead Legs were all recorded on that first night, I guess, that they were recording in there. And I don't know if they were the final versions or what. I mean, it almost sounds like they were. It was like
I think so. I think
go ahead.
The basic tracks, at least, like I think that's like I think it's probably what it was, honestly.
Yeah. So you have to figure that Eddie and Alex were, had the arrangements all worked out. They probably, those are the first 3 songs that they probably were working on. So they probably were ready to go with, how they wanted it arranged and stuff like that. And they knew their parts. And I guess they just blazed through it right there. And on the first night, which is pretty incredible, which also goes to show you what kind of like musicians they were, that they could just, a couple takes probably, you know what I mean? And they got it probably that night, from there.
I have a theory about Jump that it might not have been done that night. I think it might have been done in between the US Fest and that date, mostly because of the difference in mixing, but that might have been a later thing. If you read Ted's book, like it said that they really wanted to get Jump down before the US Fest for whatever reason, which they didn't play obviously Jump at the US Fest, but they really wanted to obviously Ted wanted that to be the single. So like he was shooting for the single like he always was. But I think they might have came back to it. But I really think that I'll Wait and Drop Dead Legs, the basic tracks, were done in that night that he's talking about, where he went home.
And your reasons for thinking that are because of what? Of some of
So I isolated the drums using those AI programs you can get, and like it works pretty well. There's definitely artifacts here and there, but what I did was take like a very the straight grooves in aisle weight and drop dead legs and time stretch them so they were the same tempo. And I sent it to John, I sent it to Alan, and I think we all kind of agreed that they were like eerily similar. I did like 2 bars of one and 2 bars of the next, like right next to each other, and obviously, like you can never get perfect with the AI isolation, so it's it could just be that and just different.
Okay,
mixing,
so just hold on, guys. I've got a question. I've got a
Yep.
question for a layman like me, and I think it might be a good question. So you're saying through your computer program that you've isolated the drum tracks, and because they match,
like
there's a match in the
exactly
frequencies.
in sound. Yeah, it's just like the snare sounds exactly the same.
They could be recorded at the same session.
It's a stretch. Like obviously,
Oh,
like things can they could have just had the same setup in the matter of
Jimmy,
2 months, but
Jimmy, have you heard anything about that? Do you have an opinion on that?
This is all news to me right here, man. I mean, I knew that a lot of the songs were worked on before Us Festival, but I mean, I've never. I mean, these guys are talking about drums, so I don't really, it's not really. So I'm just listening.
Okay.
But
Fascinating.
yeah, but like, I mean, the album had to have started before Us Festival. So yeah, so I mean, this is fascinating stuff. I didn't know. These guys have forensically, gone in there and like isolated tracks and all that. So it's cool.
All right.
So
Okay.
Ted has a lot of recollection from like May till like August maybe, and that's kind of the end of the album. He says they had 8 tracks, and he goes really in depth with Jump and I'll Wait and Hoffa Teacher in Panama and all that stuff. But then as soon as Eddie and Don start to push him away for whatever reason, he doesn't really say much about it. And I have a feeling the tracks we'll get into, like he probably wasn't there, and he obviously wasn't there for these so-called basic tracks either, because he wanted to go home.
Yeah, right, because when they did that Jump that first night, I don't think he was there when they did those 3 songs. Even those 3 songs, I think it was just Don, Alex, and Eddie. And because Eddie didn't Eddie say that he called Ted up, or Ted said Eddie called like 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I think he even drove to his house in like Century City to pick him up to bring him back to the studio at like 3 a.m. to hear like what they did with Jump. And I think
Jump is recorded. I think Jump was recorded live. I think I might have told you the other day that if you isolate the so I also because of the Rock Band game, you can download, for anyone who doesn't know, there are some available multi-tracks that were kind of provided through the Guitar Hero from the PC. You could like kind of take them out of it. Anyways, they split the drums into 4 tracks, so you can hear the bass drum, the snare, the overheads, and the toms all separated, which is super cool. But
Wow.
if you can take the overheads and listen to them by themselves and hear kind of what was happening in the room. And Don Landy he would low cut the crap out of overheads because of what was happening in the room. It was all live. You could hear Ed's synths. You could hear, and what I did was just cut. I brought all the bass back into it, and you can hear Ed's synth, obviously, because they probably tracked together, and you can actually hear Michael's bass too. And you can actually, funny enough, you can hear Dave in the room just scratch vocaling, saying whatever the heck. Like it's awesome. And I think that David and Michael were there for Jump, but I think they were gone for the other 2 songs, because Ted said the 2 of them went home too.
Right, exactly. And so the other thing that stands out about Jump is, like you said, the mix is completely different. If you listen to kick drums, anybody, when you first hear that, when Alex first hits the drums, the kick drums sound pretty thunderous, but then as soon as he kind of kicks in, the kick drums disappear. They're gone. It's like they're just like gone.
Yeah, I used to joke that it was the plywood head that he had put on. I used to joke that they mic'd the plywood up because it doesn't sound anything like the Simmons that he has on like Hoffa Teacher or Panama, or like Girl Gone Bad, where it's like super loud.
You know, it's a funny thing too is like if you listen to Jump and the kick drum is kind of lost in there, but by the time you get to that end of that album, Eddie and Alex wanted those Simmons kicks so loud. Ted
Yeah.
pointed out in his book that
Yeah.
the mix, that's not the mix that he would have done, that it was like way too much. I personally love kick drums that like punch you in the chest like that. So
Oh
I
my
was
God,
like,
yeah.
I totally love that. And on other Van Halen albums, you don't hear that at all. So I was
Yeah.
totally down with that. I love the Simmons kicks. I didn't like the Simmons toms on 5150, but the Rototoms just sound phenomenal. Anytime you ever hear Rototoms, they just sound great. They're so cool.
Well, we should talk about Rototoms if we're gonna.
Yeah, let's go. Go for it.
Because this is kind of the song that started it. Because Eddie said at one point that in his interview with Chris Gill, the book or whatever, he went into pretty deep detail in 1984 and he said that Alex used Simmons and cymbals, and then he also mentioned that he recorded the cymbals separately. So for a while, everyone kind of thought that.
Everyone still thinks that, Tanner, but we're going to kind of we're going to dispel that right now. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for a while, everyone has heard about the Rototoms. Mostly, I would say probably stemming from the Jump music video, obviously, because he uses the big rack of Rototoms and stuff. And so, just like anyway, so I've always thought they sounded like Rototoms. The Simmons toms and Rototoms, in my opinion, don't sound anything alike. I think people just kind of run with what they hear, with what Eddie was saying. And personally, I think Eddie was just mixing the entire 84 album and 5150 together, because 5150 is where he really used the Simmons. But yeah, what if you isolate the toms, like I was talking about, you can hear cymbal bleed. There's gating going on, which was possible back in 83, because Eddie had like 8 of those like Kepix, the first gates that you could ever buy. So when you hear the toms come in, you can hear the cymbal bleed in them like crazy, which wouldn't happen if you had Simmons. Simmons are just direct, just like the kicks. The kicks, you don't hear any bleed, and you hear like a lot of cymbal bleed, a lot of everything. And I think it was a crap show. Alex said it was a crap show recording because of all the bleed from other stuff. And I guess I should mention the cymbals. Eddie said the cymbals were overdubbed, and when I posted those pictures on Facebook, Alan Garber was saying, Eddie said the cymbals were overdubbed on all the tracks, which I don't remember if he said that or not. He definitely kind of alluded
I thought
that.
it was just all weight that Eddie was referring to.
I analyzed that quote because I couldn't get it out of my head, and because he says "I'll wait" right after that, you can kind of like take different things from it. Like out of context, it's a little bit different. But Eddie says that at the end of that first fill before the vocals come in, it's a mistake. He's supposed to hit the cymbal, but he does it twice in the song. both of the verses after the first verse, and then after the verse after the chorus, he comes back in, he does that, and there's no cymbal. So it's like, right. I think he just was misremembering, and if you're overdubbing cymbals, put a cymbal in there.
Right. Punch it in, right.
Punch it in, like it's an overdub. And so when people heard cymbals, a lot of people I think thought hi-hats too, and John and I talked about this a ton, like especially with I'll Wait. Even like a few weeks ago, I thought that the hi-hats were probably overdubbed too, but there's things in I'll Wait that just aren't really making sense if you overdub hi-hats. One of them being when you play as a drummer, Alex always counted on the hi-hat when he played fills, bouncing his foot, and you can hear that, and if you're overdubbing cymbals, including hi-hats, you would just stop. You play the hi-hat, stop while the drum fill happens, and then continue when it's done. But instead you hear that counting, which only would happen if you're recording the hi-hats with the toms. So I think the hi-hats were recorded with I very strongly believe that they were recorded with the rest of the drums. And hi-hats usually aren't a super problem when it comes to recording drums anyways. It's more the huge cymbals that Alex had.
Right. So and you and I discussed this pretty in depth because we were even talking about, well, did they play to a click? So you lined it up, and Alex is not playing to a click on I'll Wait because he's all over the place, right?
Yeah,
Didn't he speed
all
up
over the
or
place. Yeah.
yeah?
He always speeds up his fills. I've tempo matched a ton of songs just to see, and like he always speeds up during his fills because he's tapping with his foot, and the breakdown, the pre solo, that slows way down, like 10 to 20 BPM almost, and you don't even notice it. But that's like the magic of it. It's not a Def Leppard production. They're not recording to drum machines. It's all live, and I still don't believe the cymbals were overdubbed on I'll Wait. I'm still kind of iffy on that one because I think if he did, good on him. It's masterful the way he can like pull the hi-hats to play the cymbals because it's perfect. But when you get the drop dead legs, it's a different story.
So you want to? We'll go to Drop Dead Legs next. So, but
Yeah.
on I'll Wait, we were even, I said with the OB8, you could basically split the keyboard in half like he does on Why Can't This Be Love. In the lower half, he's just pressing one finger and it's playing 16th notes on the bass part of it. For Why Can't This Be Love. So you can split the OB8. So my thought was that the part right before the solo in I'll Wait, where it's like like, so that he was just hitting one note and it was playing those 16th notes on there instead of him just on the same key, just doing 16th notes, which I thought at one point I thought he may have overdubbed it too. But
me too.
I mean, so it's possible that he just hit the button on it to split the OB8 at that point, hit one note and was able to play the chords with his right hand, while that thing was doing the six.
The YouTuber In a Simple Rhyme, he's a keyboard player and he does like amazing like recreations of Van Halen keyboard songs that you guys should all check him out. He's insane.
Definitely.
He just did I'll Wait not that long ago, and he played that with one finger, with the double finger Billy Joel kind of thing, and I noticed also like part of the way through the song you can hear like tape flanging going on sometimes with the keyboards, and he like instead of tape flanging he plays the overtones on his keyboard and like overdubs them to make, and it's crazy. I don't know if he knew that it was tape flanging, or if he just thought it was like, but it's like it's crazy. But
in order for him to have done that, he wouldn't have been able to play that, that on his right hand. It would have had to been overdubbed. I don't know that Eddie overdubbed that live. I mean, but do you think that 16th note part, it does speed up and slow down a little bit? But here's the trick. This is something that you and I didn't talk about. I know we're probably going like, people are probably like, what are they talking about? But the problem with the Oberheim OB8 is that it did not keep perfect time when you were using the arpeggiator on it. It's actually sped up and slowed down. That's why Van Halen live never used the OB8 for the left hand part. If you notice on Live Without a Net, when you hear it's like it doesn't sound like the record because they're not using the OB8, because the OB8 would actually it's analog, so it would speed up slightly, it would slow down, it would speed up. So I'm thinking that's maybe what was been happening on that part. I didn't even talk to you about that, but I know for a fact because I have the OB8 and it does speed up and slow down slightly. So it's harder for like Alex to follow that left hand live because it does speed up and slow down. So they didn't even use an OB8.
They're messy when they play it live. After that whole part, when they go into the solo, when Eddie transfers from keyboard to guitar, that whole weird drum fill, they screw it up every damn time. It's not, I mean, it's objectively, or I went through the mightyvanhalen.net. They have bootlegs for like a ton of Van Halen concerts. So I was listening to all of them just to see, like, because Michael also plays keyboards on I'll Wait live. Whether he's just playing, I know he played Moogs. He played Moog synthesizers live. So I don't know if he was just taking over for the
Well, you can
for
hear the
the
drop off in the volume when Michael comes in and he's playing the solo. You can hear the chords.
exactly.
You can hear the drop off. So anybody that complains about Michael Anthony as a musician has no clue. You know what I mean? They just Eddie trashed him in the later years and tried to belittle him and his contributions and his obviously. This is just a sidebar. Obviously, his voice is one of the four key elements to that band sound, along with Roth's train whistle scream and Alex's snare and Eddie's guitar, obviously. But his voice it's just like you can't. You know what I mean? It was just, I always say it's like a perfect collision of molecules and atoms, and that was Van Halen at that time. It's just things like that only happen, very rarely. And so if people try to downplay his contributions as a musician, they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, he did his job and he did it well, very well. And he was the perfect bass player for Eddie in that band because he didn't try to overshadow. He was just there to support Eddie. He knew where, the star of the band was. He knew that, you know what I mean? But when Van Halen was considering bringing Billy Sheehan is a smart guy. He was friends with Michael Anthony. He wanted no part of it because Billy Sheehan's a smart guy because he knew it probably wouldn't have worked. It would have worked maybe one album and that would have been the end of it because Eddie wasn't going to want to share that kind of spotlight with Billy Sheehan. It's just human nature, man. So anyway, that's my little sidebar rant. But anyway, go ahead. Back to I'll Wait there.
Yeah, I don't have an OBA. I literally downloaded the manual to read how it worked to be able to even talk about it like this. And I did read that you could have a foot switch that would start the arpeggiator. So I wondered if he just did that. I even looked at the picture behind me down below. You could almost see it, maybe what looks like a foot pedal. So I don't know. I don't have an OBA to sit here and nerd out on. So I.
It can be done though. I have one, and it definitely can be done. And the foot pedal is the perfect theory to go with that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
OB8s have the splittable outputs on the side. It has you would know obviously, but OBXAs don't have all those plugins on the side. So you and I talked about whether he maybe he tracked with just the bass and added the top later or both, but because they're hard panned, the bass the bass side is on one side and
the synth is on one side and the bass guitar is on the other.
But that's totally possible with the side of an OB8.
Turn the knob on the side there, right on that side too. It's right on the right side.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right there. And that's probably, I honestly, like the way he talks about how they would track, like I honestly think they were that close, like just looking at each other. And he says he doesn't like to wear headphones, just listen to Al playing drums. And I believe it, like just sitting there and just.
And that's mind blowing. That's mind blowing to me that they were that good that I mean, what you're hearing on there is just like, most bands you just assume a lot of that stuff is overdubbed, but these guys, like basically that whole keyboard track and drum parts on I'll Wait, most of them obviously, the cymbals, obviously we're talking about that, but that's just the two of them right there. That's it, man. I mean, and I really do believe that he did it all in one shot. I don't think there's really any overdubs. I think that is the foot pedal on there, kicking splitting the keyboard for the 16th notes, and he's playing the chords with his right hand for that part. I think that's all done in one shot.
It's redundant to say, but like Ed's masterful, like. Even on guitar, it's the same thing. Everyone says, Eddie's rhythm is just as good as his leads. Like, obviously, we're at the point where that's pretty obvious by now. But, like the way, if you listen to early bootlegs and stuff, the way he plays rhythm and just fills all over the place, that's his style because he's playing the rhythm guitarist, he's playing Angus Young, and he's playing Malcolm Young at the same time. And he's playing, and when they do covers, he's playing the horns and he's playing the keyboard all in one. And that was his philosophy, like as little overdubs as possible. Even on the experimental albums, he got experimental with solo of overdubbing, but it was rare where you got double track guitars and and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Plus, he
and
only had
that's
16 tracks to work with too on 1984. There, wasn't like
yeah.
two 24-track machines together sync together or anything
Well,
like that.
I honestly think like the Eventide years when he started to like do the wet dry wet stuff like that, where he's splitting to both stereo. Like he liked stereo. He liked the idea that he could take up a lot of space as a solo guitarist without having to overdub 8 guitar tracks like everyone else was doing. And it's just, yeah, it's incredible that they can put down just the two of them. You get rid of the bass and you get rid of the other stuff, and it's such a powerful track.
Yeah,
without any guitar, without any Michael McDonald vocals.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, what else about All Weight? Anything else you want to add?
Well, I right after we started talking about it, Alan brought to my attention that he used the Kramer, that white Kramer Pacer Deluxe modified for the solo. It's HSS modified by himself.
Right. We think that he used that. We don't know for sure.
Well,
right?
according to Don Landy, and it's in the studio. It is in the studio.
Right.
I don't know.
Alan
It's not.
said that there's a photo. Right. You can see it. Right.
Yeah. Through the one through the glass where he's got all his guitars lined up by the glass. If you look through, the white Pacer Deluxe is laying right on top of what looks like a PA kind of speaker or something like that. So I think Alan seems to think he used it on that. Well, according to Don Landy, and we were talking about like the Wildlife tracks too. There's a lot of like second position Strat sounds, or like fourth position Strat sounds that were most likely that, because he didn't have too many like single coil guitars at that point.
So where did Don Landy say that?
I don't remember. Don Landy did an interview. I'm trying to remember what Alan told me. There's a picture. There is a photograph that I believe is a straight on photograph of it, and it's God, I wish I could remember, but
right. Well,
I believe it.
Later on, if Alan's in the chat later on, we're going to bring Alan in, so we can ask
the
him
pickups. Alan says that, or Don Landy, I believe, said that the pickups switch during the solo, which to me sounds like he did multiple takes. And because I can hear bridge pickup switching to the neck pickup and stuff like that, depending on where it is. It's definitely like a neck pickup, single coil heavy solo. And for a long time, a lot of people, I think, didn't know what guitar it was, because it's obviously a neck pickup guitar. It's very it's got that When It's Love kind of sound. And
which
solo.
We know is a Strat, right? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, but at the end of it, you hear the Floyd kind of wiggle, which is pretty obvious that it was a Floyd. So everyone was like, okay, single coil guitar and Floyd, like there's a Strat that people have seen and that he bought that like he put a Floyd on and stuff. So for a long time, people didn't really know. And I think that's probably pretty safe to say that was probably the guitar.
Right.
I mean, you can hear that, you hear the end of the solo where he does that flutter thing, but
yeah,
what guitar are we talking? There's a picture of Ed where he's holding a white Kramer Pacer with 2 humbuckers. I've never seen one with single coils.
yeah.
There's another Kramer Pacer somewhere.
It's
got a.
I thought this guitar was a Charvel, because Eddie had said in 1985 in an interview with Guitar World that I always argued with Alan that Eddie played the 5150 Kramer on 1984, and Alan said no, he didn't. He played the there you go, the Frankenstein on that whole album.
Okay, that's news. I've never seen that guitar before. That's cool.
I didn't hear about it until about 2 weeks ago. So
never seen it before either.
But here's the thing: depending on what you believe about what Eddie says, because I always thought that we know he had it at the US Festival, the Kramer 5150. And I always said, listen, when I get a brand new guitar and I really like it, that's the only guitar I want to play. So to think that he didn't play the Kramer 5150 on like Panama or something on that album, I just don't believe. I just never believed it. But I did go back to Guitar World in early 1985. They did an interview with Eddie I think it was the one where he was wearing the camouflage pants and he had the short hair. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah.
And he says in that interview that I never played a Kramer guitar on an album. He says it there. Okay, but then you fast forward to 2014 and the 30th anniversary of 1984, and Eddie says, I retired the Frankenstein by then, and I was already playing the Kramer 5150 on the album. He goes, he said he was pretty sure I already retired the Frankenstein, and I played the 5150 Kramer on that album. So, Eddie misremembers a lot of things, but I know he said on the 1985 interview, I just reread it recently, and he said I never have played a Kramer guitar on an album. And so that guitar there is a Kramer, the one in the picture right there. So
I've never seen. That's a cool picture. I have never
Yeah.
seen that. I mean, I'm 55 years old. I've never seen that picture before.
I've seen it. I've seen the one through the glass. You probably seen that picture too. You just didn't realize it, Jim, where it's through the window of the glass. You can see it. And
Wow.
You can see that guitar.
yeah, you can see the white guitar over there, and it has a Floyd on it. So it's got to be that one.
All right. Yeah. No. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, obviously, like the outro. So I mean, that solo, the outro of that solo. He does the for I'll wait.
Right. Yeah, you can definitely hear it. It's different. It's a different guitar on there.
Yeah.
It sounds,
Yeah.
but
No, the idea
Anyway.
is that I can't. I don't have the ear to distinguish between a first position single coil or fourth position single coil. If you know me, I hate
Jimmy hates single coils.
but I mean, that to me, that thing, I mean, like that solo just sounds. I mean, I don't know. I've always assumed it was, a humbucker. But again, I mean, you guys are the forensic guys. But yeah, I mean, that's a cool guitar. I've never seen that one.
When you get up to the middle of the neck, like up in the 12th fret kind of position with a single coil neck pickup, it's just got that like sound, and that's kind of what I'm hearing. It's hard to explain, obviously, and I'm kind of going by what other people have said too, like, oh, it's a Strat, but because he obviously liked Strats. He definitely liked second position, that kind of outer phase, bridge and middle. He used it all over his career. From anything from Finish What You Started to the intro to Women in Love and stuff. So yeah,
I'm kind of playing that solo through my head, and yeah. I mean, now that you guys mentioned that, it could be, it could be.
I think that on a Strat is the best sounding position. That's on my Strat. I never keep it all the way down on that treble like that. I always kick it up. I always kick it up one to there. I think it just sounds better.
I like Leonard Skinner, so they use the second position a lot, so that's kind of where I sit, and obviously Ed and Mark Knopfler and stuff. It's an awesome sound, and ZZ Top, Billy Gibbons used the crap out of that position in the early days. So
when you guys so like it's late December 1983, and like Jump was released on New Year's Day or something like that, if I remember correctly. Is that how that goes? New Year's Eve,
something like that. Yeah. Late
Wasn't it? Yeah.
When you heard, I mean, first you heard Jump, and then you heard 1984 into Jump. That for me back then, that never scared me when if Ed was playing keyboards. I didn't. It was a great song. I didn't care. Whereas a lot of people kind of got turned off by that. I every once in a while, if I'm rehearsing for a show or something, I'll run through Jump, and if you just listen to that song, by itself, it's a great song. Just from the get-go, it never gets old. I mean, that is a pop song right there, and it's. I mean, obviously, it's it kind of like drove the album sales for Hot for Teacher or whatever. But I mean, Jump was the song, and even when I got 84 and put it on and heard 1984 into Jump, I mean, that section itself as a piece, as a sound, does sound a little dated, with the keys, but man, it's still great,
Jimmy, you know why it didn't scare you?
It didn't scare me. Yeah, it didn't scare me.
Yeah, you know why it didn't scare you?
Why?
Because Panama was right after it. That's why. That's exactly why. Because I love Jump from the get-go, but as soon as I had Panama,
then you saw the video and stuff, and the video. I was listening to some other podcast about last year, and I can't remember what it was, but they were saying that like the bits in they had the director of Jump, and I think it was the same guy that did Panama, and they said that the little bits and pieces in Panama where Dave's like all the stage stuff where Dave's coming out with handcuffs or whatever, that was supposed to be in Jump. They were supposed to put into Jump, and so there's
like an hour of outtakes for all that.
Yeah.
Like you could watch it. It's all silent. It's all silent, but like the footage of Eddie with the Rasta breaking it in half, throwing it on the floor, and Alex in his little drum cave with all the sticks and stuff, and Dave getting arrested, and Dave driving his car, and all that stuff that's featured in some of it's in Panama, like Dave on his motorcycle or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but
so they had like two versions, and they decided that just the studio version was what they were going to go with, so they put that extra footage in Panama. But for a second, I want to talk about the Jump solo where it's like pieced together, where he does that descending lick, and then it's suddenly to like the tapping. Yeah, I remember.
Totally two different take. Like if you listen to the isolated track, it's very like kind of obvious, and there's tracks on Fair Warning that's the same way, jumping from the bottom to the top and stuff like that.
Yeah.
David Lee Roth mentioned that on the Joe Rogan podcast. Like Ed struggled to replicate solos live because he was doing stuff like that, finishing off a line on the 3rd fret and then playing the next line on the 15th fret. It's like, but that's his thing. It's so cool when he learns how to execute it.
I think a lot of credit there has to be given to Don Landy too.
Yeah.
Because I think that was all Don. I think Don just put those I don't think Eddie heard the solo until Don played it for him.
Yeah.
I think Eddie just laid down the tracks and he let Don basically, produce it, basically edit, cut it, whatever Don thought sounded good. We know about the end of Drop Dead Legs, and that was all Don too. So it's just like I think that Alex even said 1984. That's the Eddie and Don's masterpiece. Not just that's why Don needs to like come out of retirement and start to talk about that masterpiece that it was his masterpiece too. So I hope he. We've been hearing that he's going to come and talk to Sunset Sound, but that was a year ago now, and nothing's happened. So
they said he'd only come with Ted. I think he said that he'd only come on if Ted was going to come on. So it's kind of a waiting on Ted game. So I would love it. And they probably wouldn't even get half of the stuff that we want to hear from him. But
exactly,
there needs to be a master class on him and I don't know if you guys know Mutt Lang, he's another producer that like just makes the best albums of all time and just disappears.
Buys every photo of him that he can, so nobody can get a photo. That's how crazy he is,
I don't want to jump around a lot, but I'm trying to find out what you guys think about the very beginning of Hot for Teacher. In Ted's book, he says it's a Lamborghini, and I'm telling you, we've talked about this before. I didn't believe it until somebody played me a revving Lamborghini, and it sounded a lot like it. And he says how Don manipulated the sound to get it into time with Alex's drums. It did sound a lot like it. What do you guys think?
Lamborghini is on Panama, and if you listen, I don't know.
I know that story. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is he mistaken? Is he talking about? Is he in his head? Is he substituting Hot for Teacher for Panama? But I mean, there's the revving. There's the revving of Panama in Panama, vroom. But if you heard this audio that I heard, man, trust me, I didn't believe it either until I just stumbled across an audio of not revving, just running. running like you
idling.
Yeah.
idling. Yes, that's what I mean. An idling Lamborghini, just idling. It was like, and it sounded a lot. It sounded a lot like those drums. And if you you put some filters on there, I don't know what some studio magic, and I'm
I
not
made a
saying
video.
the very beginning could be.
I made a YouTube video about this a little while ago. Didn't really take off that much, but it was kind of just like me. I was trying to dispel the rumors because I was kind of touching back on the TED book and stuff, and uh, it's if you look up shovel, I believe it's a shovelhead Harley. It's the progression that I believe Al's playing it's called a herda, and it's a 4 notes, and the first 3 are kind of fast. And if you listen to a shovelhead Harley, it's slow like that. But in my video, I sped it up a little bit, so it's kind of that. And I think that's what he was going for. It sounds like turning a Harley on and then kind of giving it the little rev when he adds the bass drums in, and then like when he adds the rototom in, that's when it's like fully on. It's like what you pull up to next to at a red light. I don't think it was I don't think they mic'd anything. I think Alex was playing it, and well, I said earlier, you can kind of hear the stick clicks. If you pay really, really close attention, you can kind of hear stick clicks of him whacking on the Riot Shield material of the Simmons drums. And you also, in the song, he plays fills that have the sound that's in the beginning. He does fills that are kind of mixed with rototoms and Simmons. And if you like kind of listen to those on their own, it's that same like the tone of whatever Simmons he programmed on the brain. He also played it live too. It wasn't exactly like the album because I think the album was a total one shot, kind of like every single take he did was different. Because it is random. It's so random.
So you don't think there's any overdubs on the intro to Hot for Teacher at all? A lot of people say it's overdubbed.
In my video, I isolated the kicks and I isolated the toms, and as soon as the bass drum comes in, it doesn't. Unless Don Landy is a absolute genius with tape splicing, it goes straight through. There's no difference in tone. That shuffle kick just goes straight through, and I think Alex was just playing it all right there live.
Wow.
And
Great.
sadly, we don't have other takes because they got rid of everything, even in Sunset, which sucks. But he did it live, and it sounds different live because he doesn't have any rototoms. It's all Simmons. But that same kind of pattern, that was his solo. He started Hot for Teacher with it, but then also 3/4 of his solo was that kind of idling Harley sound, and then he does the Live Without a Net kind of like build up kind of thing until it goes into like hyperspace speed or whatever. But personally, I think he did it all.
I was watching this video just today, Vegas 1984. It's like 45 minutes long. I've seen it before, but so the second song is Hot for Teacher, and if you watch it, Alex cuts that intro like in half.
Yeah,
like it's very short.
It is, yeah.
And then he does the hits, and then Eddie comes in on the guitar. So I was like, "Whoa, that's really short," as opposed to like how it is on the album.
There's a ton of misinformation about it. If you look at, I think even like a Van Halen news desk post, they like talked about how he did it, and it was like Alex used 4 bass drums, and it's like, what? Like he used 4 bass drums live. I think that's where they're getting it because like his little, his fake setup. But to me, it's very obviously Simmons and Eddie and the Chris Gill Eruption book. I believe that's what it's called. Eddie says like when Alex started messing around with the Simmons part for the Hot for Teacher intro, we were, it was really cool or whatever. It sounds like, he said it sounds like a dragster or a hot rod or something like that. But like he never said, oh, we mic'd up a car for that intro. He just said Alex was fooling around with it. When Alex started fooling around, we thought it was cool. And personally, it is doable. People say it's not doable. It's not possible to play, and I've transcribed it all out using the being able to put the toms in one track and kicks in the other. That's where the confusion comes. It's because that Simmons tom sounds so much like the bass drum. It's just a jumble of just notes, and everyone's just like, oh, it's not possible because you need 3 arms, but it entirely is. And I'm hoping to get a lesson up eventually when I can actually play it.
Wow.
But
That's what you just said there. That's huge because the
Yeah.
frequencies on the Simmons floor toms and the kicks, like you just said, are so close that it's very
Yeah.
hard to separate them. Like they
Well, it's the
sound
same.
so much.
It's coming from the same brain, obviously, and the brain has its knobs, and each sample that comes out of the Simmons brain is the same, like whatever. You just EQ it differently to make it sound like a snare if you're Phil Collins or whatever the heck. But and they even have like hi-hat sounds in it too. But that's by like getting rid of all the bass and stuff like that. It's complicated. Alex's model had the bass drum, the snare, and all the toms. And that actually went up for sale on Reverb a couple of years ago, along with the snare from the first couple tours. But yeah, it's eerily similar, and I think he wanted that. He wanted all of his toms to sound like the bass drums, as you can hear on 5150 and the 84 tour and 5150 tour.
I actually think when Don Landy mixed the album too, I think that, you know, Michael Anthony's bass, we always complain that it's low. In 1984, it wasn't. I didn't think it was as bad as some of the other albums, but I feel like the bass guitar and the frequencies on the bass are almost matched to the drums and the floor tom, so that it almost sounds like one instrument. It doesn't even sound like it. Just they're so locked in, the frequencies on the bass and the drums on there. It's almost like it's one uniform instrument. You know what I mean? The bass guitar and the drum and the kick and the floor toms. And I think that was done by design because it just sounded so freaking cool. You know?
Yeah. I think Michael tracked live for the 3 songs that we have like official multi-tracks for, which is Jump, Panama, and Hot for Teacher, using the tracks that I downloaded and like boosting the bass on the overheads. You can pretty clearly hear the bass tracked in the room, and I think that's how it went. Other than I'll Wait and Drop Dead Legs, which we can touch on. I think Eddie played bass on those 2 songs.
Right, but that's important because there was a demo of Hot for Teacher going around with Eddie playing bass on it, guitar on it, and he was doing the tapping part on bass also. But so right now you're dispelling that rumor because Hot for Teacher was tracked live, and you can hear in what was it, in the overheads? Did you hear? Or
so you can't really hear much until the end, when Eddie's doing they're doing the outro that was on one of the demos from the first album.
Right. On was it Mean Street or whatever Mean Street was called at the time?
Yeah, I can't remember, but the end of it when he does the slides, and then they do the chords, or something like that. Eddie's playing something high, so his sound kind of gets quiet, and you can hear the bass kind of the last the last kind of drop. You can actually hear the bass, and so that kind of cued me in. I was like, that doesn't really happen. People can say, oh, you know, it's headphone leakage or something like that, and I don't think that's what's happening.
No, it wouldn't be like that noticeable probably with the
I think I think he tracked live with that. He tracked live on Panama.
What
the
about
only one that you think he may not, or I'll Wait, and you said Drop Dead Legs. Correct? Drop Dead Legs was the other one that you think Eddie played the bass on.
Here, I have my notes up here. I wrote what I thought about that. I think, so right now I think I'll Wait and Drop Dead Legs were tracked in the same day, as Ted was saying, and the basic tracks. And I think Michael Anthony and David Lee Roth weren't present for
They
the
went
track.
home for the night.
They went home. I think those songs were tracked just Eddie and Alex, and I think probably that night too. I think Eddie probably just put a bass track on, and using that kind of like AI isolating thing I use, like hearing the bass line on Drop Dead Legs, it's really rudimentary and very sloppy. Actually, like there's points where it like totally drifts off of the playing of the drums, which is characteristic of tracking later, which, you know, Michael could have done it later too. But Michael tended to play, not overplay, but like he would throw a tasty little fill in every once in a while because he was a bass player. He knew what to do, but Eddie didn't do that. Eddie played what he played on the key. He played the bass line on the keyboard. On I'll Wait, it's like it's exact whatever he was playing on his left hand. It's exactly the whole thing throughout the entire song. And Drop Dead Legs, it's just kind of like, bah, bah. It's boring. And I think Michael would have done a little bit more, like during the choruses and stuff like that, would have done a little bit more tastiness and stuff.
I agree.
And being that Ted said that they were done in the same day, like more and more things are kind of lining up. Like, you know, the bass tracks sound a little bit more present-y. Like Eddie could have used that sort of baritone. Alan seems to think that, and I kind of
Violette Citron. Violette Citron.
I believe that at a certain point, I believe it was 6-string bass tuning. Right now, it's in the good enough tuning, according to Wolfgang, which I believe was a later thing. But I think at one point it was a 6-string bass tuning, and I think he used it on the Wildlife sessions for Donut City. And one of the other ones that has that same kind of like baritone bass sound. But I think he played bass on those 2 tracks. He says he played bass on everything from the start. So
yeah. Which we know is not true. We know it's not true.
And
I mean,
he also sent videos to Michael on how to play everything, and you know, taught him his first words when he was born.
Yeah, exactly. You know?
What do you guys think about this thing that Steve-O and R2, R3 are talking about in the chat? Where I saw it too, where Mike Mangini, you know about this Mike Mangini thing?
Yeah.
So, like, what do you think about that? Where Eddie says that he, you know, helped out Alex on Hot for Teacher there in the intro.
I don't know. I was looking through Reddit recently. This is kind of a little bit, it's on topic, but someone was saying, "Oh, I think Terry Bozzio played on Hot for Teacher. Alex is not that good." Basically saying Alex was not that good. And I'm like, have you listened to I'm the One? Have you listened to The Full Bug? I'm like, where have you been? If you don't think Alex is that good, you haven't listened to Van Halen. I'm sorry.
There you go. That's it right there.
Or like, and then you listen later, like Get Up. Get Up is like a metal blast beat. It's like insane. And you can hear it so well. The only reason that people like you can hear it better is because of the Simmons kicks. Like the difference between I'm the One and Hot for Teacher is the present, like the kicks are just boom right in your face, and it's like, wow, he's doing that.
But just playing devil's advocate, like this guy's not saying that he thinks Eddie played on it. He says Eddie told him that he played on it.
What?
Yeah.
He did it live. He did it live, and he did it for years. It's like I don't understand.
Yeah, but live, like I said, live. I mean, you know, I'm not going to analyze every single thing of Alex. I don't really listen to a lot of Alex like you guys do.
Yeah.
But I mean, like in that, you know, like I said, like, my drummer, he'll play Hot for Teacher and it'll sound like Hot for Teacher, but it's not exactly like Hot for Teacher. You know what I mean? Whereas that beginning, those first like couple of seconds sounds like the world's gonna end. I don't know. It's just something that, you know, that just came out.
It can be done though. It can be. I've heard that drummer Glenn Sobel, I think his name is. He's a phenomenal drummer, and I've seen him play it exactly like the album. He's a phenomenal drummer, and he plays the parts like on the album. He's like obviously he's an Alex Nutt at one point in his life, so enough to where he knows how to play it. But if you guys look it up, Glenn Sobel is his name, and I mean he played it, so it obviously can be done. You know,
Josh Gallagher. Josh Gallagher is a drummer. He's in the Duraps, Jacob Duraps, the Eddie Van Halen kind of guitar. Like his drummer is insane. He's also like an Alex Van Halen nut. That's why they probably worked together so well. And years ago, he did a cover of Hot for Teacher and did the intro. And to what I'm seeing and hearing, and from what I've transcribed, I think he's the closest I've ever seen play it. A lot of people. His sound, he's using. I had the same drum module, Roland TD6. He's kind of off on the sounds, obviously, because he's not using Simmons, and it's a little jarring. But it's close. It's really close, and I give him props. A lot of people read the whole 4 bass drums thing and add extra bass drums, and Glenn Sobel plays the intro so wrong. He does the beginning part with his feet, which is incredible, and it's like talented, but it's making your job a little bit harder than it needs to be. Alex was doing it with his hands, so it's until recently I didn't really deep dive it, but it's possible, and the whole thing's possible, and the Alex was doing the doubles on the ride cymbal, which was like a him thing. Like it became like a him thing after that. You hear that all over. There's another shuffle track on 5150 or OU 812. I can't remember, but it has that. Yeah. I was listening to that earlier, and I was like, this is the same exact. It sounds like they just copy and pasted it.
So the only on side 1, the only song we really haven't talked about is Top Jimmy. I don't know if you got anything on that one. Any notes on that?
A little bit. I looked into that recently, a while ago. Actually, I started to build kind of a rudimentary version of the Ripley guitar, using there was this video game that came out a couple years ago called Power Gig. And it had this guitar that had actual strings on it that you could play. And in that guitar was a hexaphonic pickup like Eddie used. And I don't want to be saying this because you can buy those guitars for $50 on eBay and get hexaphonic pickups and just throw the rest of it away because it's all plastic junk. But I found that out through YouTube, so I guess it's not my own finding. But I started to wire it up and realized that it's a little bit harder than I thought. But I think he used the HSS Ripley on the track, and a lot of people think it was the triple humbucker Telecaster Ripley. But if you hear
Super Pluto, right? That's what that one was.
Yeah, it has like 1,000 knobs on the butt end of the guitar and stuff. And he commented on that. He said Steve gave him that guitar and it was too complicated, so he said, make me a simpler one. And what he made was, there's a bunch of pictures of him in 5150 right next to that orange, the Roland Cube, the orange amp or whatever, and he's kind of leaned up on it. And I think that was the one he used. He said later on too that, that song's cool. It sounds like it's the humbucker and the single coil mixed together. It sounds really cool because it's not like it's a Telecaster bridge pickup and a middle position. I believe it's like probably the full humbucker mixed with the middle position, which makes it sound like super, super cool. And he played through Music Man amps, 2 Music Man amps on that.
Combos, right?
Combos. And that, I believe, I don't know if he put greenbacks in those or blackbacks in those yet. I know he did. He used the same amp on Finish What You Started with the Strat. Just once.
I thought he went direct on. He said he went direct on there, didn't he? Though, but if you use that amp.
On Finish What You Started, or
I thought he just had a direct.
Yeah, he might have. I can't. I think he commented on it, but he definitely, I think he said he just got 2 Music Mans for Top Jimmy, and yeah, I don't know. There's not much to say about that one. The drums are pretty. I think by the time they recorded Top Jimmy I think Top Jimmy was one of the last songs to be recorded before August, and I think by then they were recording the cymbals with the drums. There was no overdubbing. There's no parts in it that I can hear where there's cymbals over a hi-hat, which we'll talk about with Drop Dead Legs here in a second.
Right.
But
And
yeah.
okay, so let's jump into Drop Dead Legs, and then we're done with side one. Pretty. We didn't really talk about Panama. We'll go back to that in a minute too. But go ahead. Let's go do Drop Dead Legs.
When analyzing the difference between I'll Wait and Drop Dead Legs, because they were supposedly recorded on the same night, I obviously figured.
Oh, we lost you, Tanner.
No vocals, Tanner.
You're not muted, are you?
Have you muted yourself, Tanner?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
You're back.
Okay, sweet. I think I unplugged my headphones.
No
What was I? Oh yeah, very pretty much immediately in the song, the first crashes you can hear are over the top of a hi-hat. That's what I was looking for in I'll Wait, because he obviously, Eddie said, we track the cymbals over the rest of the drums. So, and I personally, I think Alex was an amazing drummer, but I don't think he was like talented enough to only play the shell, like the snare and the kick, with no cymbals or with no hi-hat. So immediately I was I really doubted that, and I doubted that he could plan out his crashes enough to withhold the hi-hat to hit it. And it's all, if you listen to Drop Dead Legs, every crash on that song happens over the top of a hi-hat. And it's especially interesting when you get to the end of the after chorus, before Eddie plays the harmonics, and Alex does that kind of like John Bonham fill. He is that do do do, and he plays it on a hi-hat, which is like, I think in my opinion that was like his attempt to like hear what a crash sounds like in his head or something like that, because like he's so used to playing with crashes that he just can't play without them or something like that, which I wouldn't be able to. I'd be reaching for nothing all the time if I had to track without them. And then you get to the spliced on part, and that's when it's like painfully obvious, because you hear hi-hats and ride cymbals at the same time.
Yes, got 5 hands. Yeah,
it's like he's not Neil Peart.
You're right.
Like, there's things that just aren't possible, that he just plays, that aren't possible to play all at once, and that's so I'm going, okay, Eddie remembered that they overdubbed cymbals. Those could have been tracked on the same day. Like I think he could have easily just mistaken the song, or maybe like I said, I'll Wait could have overdubbed cymbals, but I just can't figure out where they are. But Drop Dead Legs, it's if you listen closely, and I know there's a lot of guitar players that are Van Halen fans, but if you listen really closely, you can hear all those crashes that happen over the top of hi-hats, and it's like really, really funny to hear.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess drummers would be more tuned into that. They'd be like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" Right?
Yeah.
So
you're playing a hi-hat and the ride cymbal, then you have to hit the snare, and then hit the snare again, and then crash, and it's practically impossible. And I don't think Alex wouldn't have played that.
Right.
Wow.
He had a really fast right hand for the hi-hat, and then also a really fast hand for the ride for the overdubs. But it's pretty conclusive for me that the overdub cymbals are on that track, and that track alone.
Right. And that end piece that Don Landy edited, spliced on there. I can only imagine that they must have been just jamming, obviously, throughout that night and stuff like that, and that must have been just a piece. It just the fact that it's in like the tempo. It's matched up and I mean, well, I guess they were jamming it as part of that song. I guess at one
Yeah.
point, you know what I mean, and he must
The
have just
cut is
saved it.
really clean.
Yeah,
Don did an amazing job on the cut. It's almost undiscernible, and I think Eddie said in the interview that he was trying to do like an Alan Holdsworth kind of solo on top of that. And
yeah, like a legato kind of.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
evident. That the run he does a couple of runs in a row that are kind of out of nowhere, but kind of reminds me of the Rosanna kind of jam
Outro,
yeah.
yeah, that's true. But
yeah,
that I mean, we haven't been really talking about guitar tones much on that, but we all know, 1984 was much less gainy kind of sound than the other Van Halen albums to that point. It was much,
on a Flying V.
Yeah, on a Flying V, exactly. So we know he played, we don't know what he played in the solo for Jump. Some people think it was a V. Some people think it was the Frankenstein. I don't know if we'll ever really know on that. As we said, I don't.
Alan suggested that, like, Alan really brought to my attention that, like, when Eddie has a tremolo arm, he uses it. There's not a single track of our knowledge, even a rhythm track, where if he has even Mean Street, there's that one harmonic bar dive, and like without that, we would have never known what guitar he would have played. But with that one bar, he's like he couldn't resist for that one bar dive. And typically if he did a solo with a bar dive, if he did a solo with a guitar with a bar, he'd use it, so most people say it's Flying V. He had a ton of guitars, so whatever. But
and we don't really know how many. Were you able to determine how many splices there were in the Jump solo? Is it 4? Is it 6?
I don't remember. Alan would probably know that better. I haven't.
Is Alan in the chat? I don't even know if is he there. No, he's not.
I know the one that we talked about earlier is that one's quite like the one that jumps back up.
Yeah.
I think most of it. I think it's honestly like 2 or 3 maybe, but it's almost possible to play. That one jump is the only like kind of superhuman thing you'd have to do if you played it live, but the rest of it's. I mean, people do lessons all over YouTube about it. It's pretty.
Right.
I'll say easy, but it's not easy.
Yeah. But Panama, he probably used the Frankenstein. If he didn't use the 5150 Kramer, it's one of those two, I'm assuming. We know what he used on Top Jimmy, and we know he used the V for the main part of Drop Dead Legs, and probably the Frankenstein or the 5150 on the outro part of that. I mean, that seems to be the thinking there on side one. And, we know it's the Plexi, and it's not, I mean, he's got the Eventide on it. You can hear the Eventide, but it's not just fully overblown in the, it's like 5150. Very much more subtle. That's
all
my
the
favorite.
All the songs have, almost all the songs have the left track kind of like panning like the rest of the albums. Drop Dead Legs has the split. It's right in the center, and it's got the kind of even. It has a much stronger Eventide sound, like the split kind of.
Right.
I think at that point he was using. Well, I think it was probably like a Don Landy thing after the fact. I don't think Ed was using Eventide on his tracks, like live in the room.
Right, probably in the rack, I guess. Maybe when he had it all that later.
That's what I think.
And
it's really subtle.
Keith says Top Jimmy, the solo was with the Frankie, which makes sense too. Because there's definitely a bar in there. Frankie and or 5150, depending on which Eddie you believe. The Eddie of 1985 says he never played a Kramer on a record, or 2014 who says that by then he'd retired the Frankie and he was only using the 5150. But that's another argument, and only person that might be able to. I don't know how detailed track sheets Don Landy would have kept, but you would think you'd think they would make notes of things like that. I mean, Ken Dean was the second engineer on 1984.
Alan,
Ken Dean was was also
Alan brought that to
51.
my attention. He was like, "Why aren't we asking Ken Dean about any of this stuff?"
Yeah, I'm with Alan 100% on that. Because Ken Dean was there on 5150, and he was the second engineer in 1984. And you would think, I mean, that they would keep notes on that. If you had to go back and do overdubs or anything like that, you want to know what guitar you were, hey, Ed, you use this guitar on this track, just obviously for any kind of notes like that, you would think that they would have kept, track of that kind of stuff. So maybe they do know, maybe someday we'll find out, but obviously nobody's talking right now. But so
I'll
if
use
we
the
jump
bathroom
over to
real quick, guys.
Yeah, sure. And then we'll hit on Panama and Girl Gone Bad and House of Pain. And
I need to jump in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I need to pay my respects to Drop Dead Legs. I mean, if I was thinking about this last night, if I could listen to only one Van Halen song for the rest of my life, it would have the old Jimmy Valens would have probably said Mean Street. But this Drop Dead Legs, man, there's a lot going on. Like that very first note, like his sound, like I think I talked about this before. The sound is clean but distorted.
It growls. It's got a growl to it.
I call it breathes. It's like breath. It's like breathy. Like it's so touch sensitive to when he's doing it. And then when he brings up that volume, it's like, whoa! I can't. I wish I was in the room to hear that.
Yeah,
it
I
is.
agree.
That sound is so hard to recreate, man. It's so touch sensitive, and just like that volume roll that he does when he goes into the riff. And forget about the riff. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I thought that. I mean, I used to play that with the bar until 2 years ago.
Right.
And we were talking about. I'm jumping around here on that song, but we were talking about guitars that have bars and stuff. I mean, that outro solo he does. He does. There's no dive bomb, but he pulls up. He sounds a note with the bar depressed and pulls it up in that ending solo twice. So like what was that? The 5150? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the pictures before, there's one picture in early 83 of him. It was featured in the Ted Templeman book in black and white, but there's a color version on the internet, and you can see Alex's full Simmons drums, which a lot of people think means that he used only Simmons on the album. And he's holding the the Steinberger black bass, headless bass, and to his right on a chair, the Frankenstein's there. At that point, it probably had the had the Kramer beak neck from Usfest, or it even had the ugly Dan Electro the Rude neck, the one that was, because he did Starfleet right before they started, and that's what the neck was on it then. And then the promo videos for Usfest had that Rude neck on it still, and then a week or two later at the Usfest, it finally had the Kramer beak neck. So any song that he would have the Kramer, he would have used the Frankenstein on, would have had the Kramer beak neck.
That riff at that the solos, the second part of the song, that riff is just amazing, man. And then that solo that he does. I mean, I think that's maybe my top 3, moments of Van Halen. That solo at the end of that. I got to give a shout out to Jamie Humphries, man. He's got a great video showing how to play that stuff, And I watched it, and that helped me out a lot. The thing with that solo is, every time you hear it, you hear different stuff. It's not like Running with the Devil, where you can recreate those notes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of noises in there. There's stuff that you can't analyze what he's doing. Like if it was a different take, it'd be a different sound on those notes. So it's just like that snapshot of what he was doing in the studio on that track. And I mean, it's like you guys were saying, there's like these Holdsworth runs in there, and again, like this Jamie Humphries video, like I had to sit there and I had to memorize the licks, what lick comes in after what lick, the lick that before it. And it kind of, he did his best, trying to recreate everything. But that, I mean, I can listen to that solo forever. That solo and that whole song, the beginning, and then like, you got the build up, and then Alex comes in with the, and then the riff starts for the like the ending part, right? And that riff alone is just beastly, right? And but the solo is just some. I mean, if I had to play somebody a Van Halen song and show Eddie's true talent, it'd have to be that solo is just unbelievable.
We should mention that Drop Dead Legs is one of 2 songs on the album that Ed was inspired by AC/DC.
That's right.
Panama being the other one. And you can definitely hear Panama. I always said the Panama main riff sounds like it sounds like Dog Eat Dog on the Let There Be Rock album. And then he said that he was inspired by the groove of Back in Black for Drop Dead Legs. So
yeah,
I believe it.
so they played festivals with AC/DC, and I remember him saying what inspired Panama. He was back in the trailer, I guess, the backstage, and he could hear AC/DC playing, and that four on the floor drum beat with the kick on every beat. That's where like a bunch of AC/DC songs have it. I always think of like what song do I always think of with the 4 on the floor on Back in Black? There's a couple songs like that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think with the Shoot to Thrill or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got it's got that 4 on the floor, and it's obvious that they did that a lot. And Panama has that. Most drummers, when I watch them play live bands, they don't play it right. They just play it. They don't play the kick on every beat.
Oh, the double the ghosting kicks. I forgot to mention that.
Oh, right. When we go to Panama, you got to go. That's we got to talk about it. I'm glad you remember that. But usually drummers go, kick, snare, but Alex is going kick, every beat, kick, snare, at the same time.
And then the
right, exactly.
And he has that.
Which, to be honest with you, if you listen to every disco song from the late '70s, they're all 4 on the floor. That was like a trademark disco thing,
Yeah, it wasn't an Alex. I mean, it wasn't really an Alex. Typically, like it wasn't something that he did often. So
exactly.
I think it's very much like AC/DC. Eddie said he liked Power Ridge in the last 10 years when he said he liked that album, and I believe it. I think Eddie liked early AC/DC. I mean, there's a ton of those songs that start with the kind of tom groove that Panama starts with, and on the drums, but also like just the chords. I mean, I listen to a lot of music, and obviously, but the ending of a lot of the songs, especially on the first album, the brand. I think of that as an AC/DC thing. Someone could tell me that someone did it before AC/DC, or someone else could have inspired him. But 3/4 of the songs on the first album do that kind of the feedback, and then and AC/DC does that on almost every song in their entire catalog. So it could be anyone, but I always say that's the AC/DC ending, and that was like.
Well, Sucker in a 3-piece is basically Down Payment Blues. It's the same song. I mean, just the way that ascending, it goes up, it modulates like that. It's basically the same exact thing. Anyway, so we'll go to Panama now because we were talking about that. So point that out what you were just saying about the ghost, which is kind of cool.
I was analyzing the drums a while ago, along with everything else, and if you listen to the kick track. You can hear the 4 on the floor, but in between you hear and it sounds like a delay almost. But I think honestly, Alex was like still getting used to the Simmons pads because you could, and it's most likely his bass drum pedal bouncing against it after he hits it, because it's, like I said, plastic. It's plastic. And I don't know what kind of beaters he was using on that kind of stuff. I know he liked the felt Speed King kind of stuff for any drummers out there, but he used wooden drum beaters too. So I don't know. I just got a new electronic drum set, and it has kind of a rubbery thing, and I just had to completely change how to hit the bass drum, because I can't bury it anymore, because it'll bounce and do a double hit, and that's kind of what's happening. I want to get it up on YouTube soon, because not a lot of people know about it, and it sounds like a heartbeat almost, because it's like a kind of like a ghosting kind of thing, and I think it's really cool. It's kind of sloppy almost, like you might not even really want that in your drum track, but you can't really hear it. So I guess good take. It's a good take.
That's pretty wild. I never ever noticed that on there until you told me about it. That's pretty cool. But so Panama was the only song tuned down a half step on that album. It was funny because everybody thought when Sammy joined the band, that's when Eddie started tuning to A440. But 1984, that other than the Top Jimmy, that weird tuning that he was using there, Panama is the only one with that's tuned down a half step, and everything else is tuned. Yeah, exactly, right. So it's funny when I listen to the isolated guitar track for Panama. It's a lot of times, a lot of these songs, and you listen to it, the tone doesn't sound as good as it does when it's in the mix with the bass and the drums like that. It's just it's amazing. Probably because really that Marshall, even though it was the same head he used for all the other albums, but everything was probably still dimed up. You know what I mean? Except for the bass on there. He probably had no bass in it, and just everything else. The mids and the high, the treble were everything was dimed probably on that. And it's funny how when it sits in the mix with the bass and and especially on 1984, because the kick drums and stuff like that, the guitar tone sounds phenomenal. But it's funny when I listen to the isolated Panama track, it's like, wow, this is it, huh? Raw. It's very raw sounding,
Yeah.
So, but what else you got on Panama?
Mostly just kind of back to the leakage. You can hear a lot of bleed on the drums, and Eddie said that they tracked together in the room, his cabinet in one corner and Alex's drums in the other. And I got rid of the background because I think it was killing my internet. But you can see that if you look at a few of those pictures from that photo shoot, you can kind of see Ed's cabinet is sort of over on the other side of the room. I think that's how it stayed until the renovations. Just so, and in the picture I had, you can also see, which I don't think they had probably yet, the huge baffle between the piano and the drums. They were experimenting. They were still building the studio while they're recording. And most of the album was just Eddie and Don just experimenting and adding and subtracting elements of the studio, and it it's hard to tell. But
and the thing about it was so the main room in there, I'm trying to remember, I have it I actually have it saved, like the dimensions of everything and all kinds of like engineering stuff. I don't know if you've seen that. I think it was only like 17 by 34 or something like that. The room, it was 17 by 35.
I think it was like 17 by 23. I think I just looked at it the other day. The guy that helped build it, that had that whole article, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's cool.
Because I'm a carpenter, so sitting there and going, all the different layers for the walls, and then even like they built like a chicken coop. They called it the chicken coop around
Faraday
it. So
cage.
because there was a local radio station that they didn't want to hear in Ed's wireless units. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, and so Ted said in the book that he didn't like it because it was just unfinished. There were wires everywhere. It was just like exposed wires, wood beams and things like that. So and plus the size of the control room was so small too. It's tiny, but that when you think of, it's just amazing to me. It's like, I think that album sounds so phenomenal. I mean, I like the way that album sounds. This is just me personally, better than even any of the Sunset Sound albums, which is kind of crazy. And the only reason I say that is because I hate the drum sound on all of. Diver Down, I could kind of tolerate it. It started to get, you could start to hear Alex's signature snare really coming through there. But occasionally on Fair Warning you would hear it a little bit here and there. But I just thought that I hated the plate reverb. I don't think there's as much of it on 1984 as there is on all the Sunset.
He had one, but I don't think they used it.
Yeah,
as
and
much.
as time went on, the later Van Halen albums, there was no plate on there. They hated Eddie and Alex hated the plate there, but Don and Ted used that a lot. I guess it was really kind of a '70s thing on all those albums back then. You had a lot of plate, and Sunset Sound, I guess, was known for that, that kind of sound too.
I'll wait and Drop Dead Legs are very dry. I'm sure you guys have noticed that, but like they said those two. Eddie said those two tracks when they started recording them. That was like I think Ted even said it too. Everyone was saying that was when they started going for the brown sound.
Right.
It was less of Eddie's guitar or Alex's drums. I think it was a collective element between them. It was like they wanted like that kind of the room sound. Eddie wanted it to sound like it did in the room, and the cavernous reverbs and and stuff. It wasn't what they sounded like live necessarily, and so I think they were happy that they could have the control.
It's funny because Eddie looked back fondly on those Simmons drums and those things. He goes, and it's true because 1984, for what it was, 4 years later, OU812 with the acoustic drums in that room, they didn't sound good at all. I think that the drums sound terrible on that album. OU812.
I think it's kind of boring.
Yeah, and I know at one point Eddie had his like 412 one, the half cabinet in the kitchen, I think in the storage closet or something in the kitchen, and Michael Anthony recorded a lot of the bass direct on there so they could give Alex that room when they were tracking. So I mean, obviously in '91 that changed with For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. They finally did it the right way that they wanted to, and from there on out, the stuff sounded really good, the drums. But I just think 1984, the Simmons and the kicks mixed up so loud and high like that. I just think it's a great sounding record.
It's so crisp. It's so crisp for how like caveman the setup seemed to be. I can't believe that that's what they put out in that environment.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But so back to Panama. Anything else on that one?
I think that was the one. Or no, sorry, that was Hopper Teacher. I was listening. I was going to mention you can hear the alternate vocals in the bass track.
Oh yeah, we didn't. Did we talk about that when you talked about Hopper Teacher?
No, I didn't say it. It's pretty quick. If the bass track, I believe, I don't know how because I guess I don't understand. But if you in Hopper Teacher, you get to the bass, you get to the talking break with all the school classroom sounds and stuff like that, and the bass goes quiet. Everything goes quiet, and if you isolate the bass in that part, there's kind of a little bit of noise, and if you jack it up to high heaven, you hear a lot of tape warble and stuff like that. But you hear alternate takes of David Lee Roth saying, I texted it to you because I was trying to make sense of what he was saying, but it's kind of funny.
One of them was one line.
I heard you miss me, baby. Well, I'm back, which is not what that was in the first one. It's basically what he says in the final one, but it's a different kind of tone, and he's kind of just saying it. He's just like, I heard you miss me, baby. Well, I'm back. And he says a couple other things, and it's like and the other breaks too. It's you can hear kind of different alternate kind of lines that probably might have been coming through the control room. Like I guess I don't understand necessarily every single aspect of old tape recording and stuff like that. So there's definitely some like artifacts and stuff with the.
But it goes to show you that Dave was probably somewhere in a booth in there with the mic, with headphones on, and while they were laying down the basic tracks for the song, he was probably singing along and scatting along and making up words and things like that.
In Jump, you can hear it in Jump. If you boost out the overheads track, he is in the room, and that's what Ted said. He liked Dave being there, and I believe it. I think for every album up until I think Dave was there, whether it was skippity bop bop for the words or what, I don't know, but I think, and you can kind of hear that he doesn't have the words perfectly together yet for the kind of scratch vocal. But we didn't mention Michael McDonald's help on Isle of Wight, but
yeah, that was I mean, I think probably to this day, I mean, I know Michael McDonald has made a lot of money off of it, and I've heard him talk about it since then. But yeah, they kind of did him dirty. I mean,
they
Eddie
sure
claimed
did.
Eddie claimed that Ted had, when Ted was there with Dave, that Ted had a little micro cassette
Yeah.
recorder and recorded Michael McDonald's melodies and stuff that he was making. Yeah, and Ted was good friends with Michael McDonald, but Eddie actually said that in the magazine. I read that last week again.
I read it too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, he kind of threw Ted under the bus there. You know what I mean?
Well,
So,
Ted didn't really know. I don't even know if Ted was present, or I don't even remember. Something happened. Like Ted didn't realize that, like, of something, because he was kind of well, he says he was blind to the fact that Michael McDonald had so much input on it. So, you know, who's to say? But it reflected the relationship in the book. He talks about in a later chapter. Michael McDonald came back in to say hi or something, or Eddie showed up one time while they were doing a Michael McDonald thing, and there was a little tension, and I believe it.
yeah, I mean, Eddie and Alex kind of bowed out. They basically tried to say, "Oh, we had nothing to do with that. We weren't there for it. We don't know anything about it." But you know, as always with royalties and Van Halen, you know, you look at Michael Anthony on that particular album too. You know what I mean? That was
that's screwed up.
Yeah, they wanted bigger pieces of the pie. Some of those guys, so there was that, I guess. But anyway, so before we hit the home stretch here with the last two songs, you got anything else?
Not really, just a Lamborghini that we talked about earlier. That's recorded in the breakdown, and
yeah. And if people want to hear the Lamborghini on YouTube, they've isolated it, the whole thing there. You can listen to every bit of the Lamborghini stuff, the stuff you can't even really, it's not even audible on the album, the revs and stuff like that. You can hear it.
You can kind of only hear the whoosh in the eventual thing, but there's rumble. It rumbles the entire time, and then you hear the whoosh, and then it rumbles again, and then it's really cool.
Exactly. So that's on YouTube. So jumping into now, the next two should be, you know, a little simpler. Or at least Girl Gone Bad should be, because that's just obviously they were just jamming. That was just a completely live jam in the studio there. And it's funny because I think that was one where, you know, when the mix was done on that and House of Pain, those two, Dave's vocals are very low on House of Pain they are, and even on Girl Gone Bad they're not as loud as, it's like the music is taken over there. And I think that was one of the songs they were particularly talking about, the kick drums being really way up in the mix, you know. And so go ahead, give us something with Girl Gone Bad. Anything you found out about that?
That was I think that was one of the last songs to be recorded, but they had it almost together at the US Fest, as I said earlier, when they played it in the middle of Somebody Get Me a Doctor, with the kind of extended jam, and then they did the I'm So Glad from Cream at the end. So they obviously had it pretty well together. And there's also those outtakes on YouTube. I looked high and low to see where they came from, because everyone's saying, "Oh, this is a studio outtake and this and that," but people are going, "Oh, it's either a studio outtake from 1983 or it's a soundboard from 1982." I'm like, how does this stuff go on YouTube and no one remembers how?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Like, who got access to this and didn't write where it came from? So you know people can speculate until someone like has something for sure. So it was together, and I think it was one of the last songs that were recorded, because the cymbals were tracked with the drums, which is kind of a later thing. And it's a really developed song. And it was definitely done by August, I think, because Ted said 8 songs were done by August. And then
so they, after the US Festival, I don't think they jumped right back into recording. I thought they waited a little. It was like sorry.
It was July. I believe it was July when they start, or it was summer. Ted said summer. And the first 2 tracks that he says that they broke on was Panama and Hot for Teacher, which he liked, because he was like, you know, after hearing Jumpin' All the Way, he's like,
You're right.
So he was making fun of Ed. He said that he made fun of Ed, and Ed confirmed it. He was
Argent.
singing Argent, yeah, hold your head up or whatever, which I don't
I don't get
understand why.
that. I don't get that at all.
Eddie didn't get it. I don't get it. I still don't get it. And Ted seemed to remember that of everything. I'm just like, okay. But
Yeah.
so I think those two tracks were the next ones, and then the remaining was Jimmy, Girl Gone Bad, and House of Pain, which obviously House of Pain had been kind of an idea since '76 at least, and which I prefer the original because I'm a metal guy, but
Um,
yeah.
on both of those songs, there were guitar overdubs, prominent guitar, important
Hmm.
ones, to the point where he couldn't play them live, like House of
Yeah.
Pain. Didn't even play really the solo. He went into like the rhythm part of it for live for that. But that's the only obviously when they did House of Pain in the studio, he did it kind of the way he did it live, and he probably overdubbed obviously the solo part after that. And Girl Gone Bad, I mean, that's I mean, there's an overdub in there too. So it's like, but that's nothing too crazy going on there as far as
Yeah.
anything other than that, really. And you
Yeah,
think
I don't
both
have
of
any.
those,
I don't have any multi tracks for those, and there isn't a whole lot of information on those either. So it's hard to.
yeah, but they were probably recorded a little later, I would assume, in the
I
process,
think
like you
so.
said. And the cymbals seem to be tracked with the drums, live at the same time.
Yeah, I think
But
so. There's just like Alex was a relatively like improvised drummer. Like I have a feeling. I think past the first few albums, I think he loosened up a bit, and fills were never played the same. Maybe I'll wait. Probably like if it's a motif, like the fill before the vocals, like that's something that you can easily remember. But like when it comes to crash placement and fills and stuff like that, I think he was a pretty fluid guy, and I don't think that he could have sat down later and overdubbed cymbals over parts that were just random moments of intuition and jamming.
right. Although it's funny because that little motif you're saying in "I'll Wait," 2015, I guess maybe because of his tom setup, he couldn't really do what he did on the record anyway. He
Oh,
did it completely differently, right?
yeah, Alex did start to play things differently. I noticed I was watching Dirty Movies live, which you and I have talked about before,
Yeah.
but in the intro, on the record he plays singles with his one hand, but live now that he's 70 years old, he uses both hands, and I noticed that, and you can hear a definite difference. But Eddie was one that didn't change much, but Alex definitely probably with the wear and tear of drums probably started to lighten up.
That's pretty amazing. So, I think we've kind of brought a lot of points up as far as 1984. Obviously we kind of shot down the fact that Michael Anthony didn't play on like Hot for Teacher, things like that. And as far as the cymbals, certain songs where they said this, like I'll Wait, where the cymbals were recorded, separately, but like you pointed out, that the hi-hats most likely were always recorded with the drums on there. They were never really, no hi-hat was
Yeah.
overdubbed really
I don't
on the
think
album at
Alex
all.
could have just sat there and just went kick, snare for the whole song without at least something. I mean, he could have kept time on his lap. There's a million
Yeah.
things. People were
Well,
doing that stuff in the '80s all the time, but
yeah, you might have, and if that was the case, if he had a rolled up towel that he was hitting instead of a hi hat,
yeah,
you might have heard something, some kind of bleed on an overhead or something like that. Now here's another question for you. And you got a pretty clear photo of the studio setup at that time. How many mics did you notice on I see obviously there's like two overheads I see, and the
yeah,
rototoms, were they
true.
individually mic'd?
Um, I don't think so, but I think they were for '84. I don't think they were for 5150, because they're so you can make a track out of them, for the Guitar Hero.
Right.
and they had their own reverb on them. I think they were. There's a lot of bleed in them. That's why they're gated for the entire song until the point, and then it's gated afterwards. But I think, I think there was two rototoms as seen in the '85 studio photo. I think he had at least one floor tom, maybe two, because in the jump video he has two. But I only hear three toms on the whole album, pitch wise, and
Now,
plus the Simmons. But
right. So what about Simmons floor toms on the album? Because if you listen to the end of like Top Jimmy or the end of Girl Gone Bad, it sounds like he's got the Simmons floor toms on there too.
yeah, he was doing that. He was doing that kind of like motorcycle fill.
Right.
That at the end. I think it's Top Jimmy that he does it. I think I found out that was Rototom. The first two hits were Rototom, and then the Simmons kind of did the rest.
Right.
He obviously had them on his kit because Hopper Teacher is kind of mid album recording, and I think he just wasn't using them as much. Why, I don't know, but I honestly think Hopper Teacher is the only time he uses them, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's it. But the kit didn't really change at all for, I guess, the recording of the album. That was it. And which was he using the SGS 8 at that time, or was it SGS 5 Simmons?
5, I think.
Okay.
I think he only used the 5,
Yeah.
two rack, or maybe one at that point. But live he used the two racks because he had five toms and the two bass drums or whatever.
Right.
I got to talk to a guy on Facebook named Neil Rudolph. I don't know if anyone's friends with him, but he's got a 5150 tour set replica. It's insane.
I just spoke to him the other day. I told him that he should get in touch with you.
He said a friend of mine told me to talk to you. And his kit is crazy, but yeah, we were talking about.
Yeah, you guys got to see. We got to talk about this guy in the future too. He's building the replica kit from. What is he doing right now? He's building the replica kit. He had.
It's basically. I think it's the Live Without a Net. Basically, I mean, it's the 5150 tour
with
set.
the red tubes
like
that.
It's the Vista Light kind of clear set.
Right.
With all the rack of the clear the long toms, whatever those are called.
Octobans. Yeah.
It's crazy. He even got the same like cymbal stands that Alex had. The brand and the I was like, this is insane.
Yeah, I appreciated it when I saw that. So I hit him up and I was talking to him and I go, you got to talk to Tanner because we were talking about the snare sound, which is, it's funny. We're talking about the 1984 album. We're focusing a lot on the drums here, but Alex is the snare sound on like All Wait is just that's the Alex Van Halen snare. Even the later stuff on Balance and stuff like that. I don't think any snare sounds better than All Wait. I just think that's the perfect Alex snare sound.
Rick Beato did a good thing trying to replicate that snare and not that. Recently I saw someone replicate the Hoffa Teacher snare, which is subjectively crap to me. There's no reverb on it. You can barely even hear it because the song is so fast. You don't get a chance to get a good crack on the drum. But I'll wait and Drop Dead Legs. Oh my god, that's just
you got it. Those are perfect. It's funny because you're right. Hoffa Teacher and Panama, the snare sounds like crap too. It's not. It's a little wet. It's a little wetter sounding. A little more.
Yeah.
You hear the snares a little more. It doesn't have that kind of bonk sound to it at all.
Yeah.
Like Drop Dead Legs and
almost like it sounds like a cowbell. Something like Jeremy White. Jeremy White is he's like an Eddie Van Halen guitar guy. He's like, I'm convinced that there's a cowbell in Alex's snare, and I'm like, I hate to say that I believe it.
I've always said if you know what I walk around doing, I get it when the paper towels are done. I get to take the paper towel roll and you hit it on your arm, and it sounds like Alex there. Everybody, next time you get your paper towels run out, take the towel thing out and just hit it on your arm. Walk around your house and hum I'll Wait. It sounds just like Alex's snare. So
being a woodworker as I am, like you beat a log on a piece of something or a piece of wood on something, and I think that's what they meant by the brown sound. Yeah. Eddie said like it sounds like he's beating on a log, and that's to me that's characteristic of the wooden snare that he was using at the time.
And especially those two songs, because it's funny when you think about it. We're saying Hot for Teacher. I said Panama. Jump doesn't have that Alex snare sound either. Really, it's the ones that really stand out are All Wait and Drop Dead Legs. Those have that definitive Alex
The
kind of
multi-tracks available, and some of the songs do have the kind of that Templeman, Landy kind of mixing, a lot of reverb and stuff like that. And I think it's surprising that the so-called first two or three songs, if you believe that they were tracked like I said, have that perfect sound, and then the rest of the album has what they so-called didn't like, which was baked in reverb and it's kind of interesting that they went that route. I know Landy would mix by himself without Eddie, so and they were good friends, so I'm sure Eddie was just like whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they'll ever come and speak about this. We just got to hope that eventually something comes out, especially obviously the first 6 albums, I think where people will be the most interested in. But this album always interests me because it just seemed like just a crazy time, and everything that went on, and every account of that time was just like, they were like mad scientists up there, for 2 days in a row without sleeping, you know what I mean, working on this, and I mean, it's amazing because, Don Landy mastered all their albums too, which is incredible because you never hear that. You know what I mean? It's always usually somebody else mastering albums, but he mastered them too. So,
and he would remember because that was like his. I mean, that other than Doobie Brothers and Little Feat and all that stuff, like that was like his career, and like you get all these people going into Sunset that are like Peggy McCreary. As much as I liked her interview and stuff, like she's like, "Oh, I wish I could remember," and I'm like,
"Right,
come on."
I know,
give us a little bit more, but they couldn't be expected to remember bands that they didn't even think were going to take off. Like I get it, but Landy would remember, and just like Ted remembers, like it would be a gold mine of information, and it's put the hashtag up again.
Yeah, Landy has all his production notes. He's got them.
Yeah, you would think, right? You would think so, Andrew, right? I mean, the guy was like, when you see that the guy rewired that with a telephone company punch down tool, rewired that whole board. He knew where nothing was labeled, and he knew where everything went. He, obviously, people said he's like he was a borderline genius when it came to that kind of stuff. He was just so great at it. So you would think that he would have kept pretty detailed notes on, different things, for different tones, and okay, you use this guitar on this and this amp, and here are the amp settings and stuff like that.
Speaker position and mic positions and stuff, which we have seen some of the ones from the first few albums, but it would be nice to see drawings
but
and stuff like that from the rest.
Conch, you there?
Take over, Jimmy.
At least it's not me this time.
Take over, Jimmy. Top Jimmy.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, that's a lot of great information there on the whole, drums, and what an incredible story about the guy that's building the 5150 replica kit. I mean, where does this guy keep that thing?
Good. It looks like it's in his living room, and it takes up 3/4 of it.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know that thing.
I hope I can hear. I want to hear it one day. He's got. I mean, to everything, to the sticks, to the stands, the drum, to the snare. I couldn't believe it. It's got to be $10,000.
He's got to be single. He's got to be single.
Wow. What's your favorite Alex drum kit?
Oh boy. I love the that's hard to choose, honestly. I like the jump video one, but because it's kind of simple, you can see. I like the drum sets so you could see him.
Is the jump video the one that he used live with the sparkle?
The mirror.
Yeah. That's my favorite.
It was a broken down version. It didn't have all the octobons, but it had the rototoms and the mirror kicks and the mirror toms and stuff. And you could like, I just like when you can see him play rather than just a wall of
Yeah.
of drums.
That's
Or
what
a
I loved
stick.
about that's what I loved
Yeah.
about the jump video, in that, like, the camera's focused on Alex too, like it's moving around
Yeah.
Alex, and you can see him, hitting,
Well, that's the fault of video recorders back then. That live videos, they zoom in on Dave the whole time, and you're like,
Mhm,
turn it on Eddie, turn it on it,
mhm.
please. I just want to see what he's playing. I don't want to see David Lee Roth anymore. As much as I love him.
Dave, yeah. I know. Well, I remember around that time, they, because I had never heard Eddie talk. I mean, I'd never heard
Yeah.
Eddie speak until when I saw that Frank Sinatra video where it starts off with. Have you seen this? Where it starts off with Dave and Eddie getting to a limo, and
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah, and like Eddie says something like, "Yeah, put it in." I'm like, "Whoa, man, that's what he sounds like." It was
I just
crazy.
heard a lot of people thought the "Come on, Dave, give me a break" thing was Eddie for the longest
Yeah,
time, and it's Ted.
yeah.
Ted said that in his book, which I was surprised by. But I think a lot of people said, "Oh, the first time I heard Eddie was the 'Come on, Dave, give me a break." But sadly, that's not true. But yeah,
Yeah.
being young, I've never had this kind. It's cool hearing you old farts talk about. No, it's funny. It's funny to hear like the lack of knowledge that people have for so long, and now there's just so like I just
Well,
sit.
that's the thing. Like when we, when we were in the '80s and stuff, like you didn't have, like I didn't even. I think I was talking about this before, where like you were a Van Halen nut, but maybe your buddy was a Van Halen nut, but you didn't know
Yeah.
there was a whole, there, you didn't know there was Van Halen nuts out there in like New Zealand with like Andrews,
Yeah.
crazy. I remember I went to I was in Greece in 1985, and on vacation there with my family, and I was hanging out with these kids that I knew, and I was way into music, and they were asking me, what's your favorite band? Van Halen. Nobody knew nobody knew who Van Halen was. I'm like, it was so foreign, because here I am, like a year after, 1984, and I'm like, you never heard Van Halen? But they know Van Halen, you know?
I
Yeah.
for the first for the longest time I've been very prone to the first like three albums. I'm a very 70s, like the 70s kind of sound Van Halen, and I love 84. I'm here talking about it, and I love them all. I've been appreciating the Hagar years more now that I've matured to realize that they're not just synth pop garbage with
Mhm.
David Coverdale singing over it. Um, but I just I liked those first three albums, but yeah, now that I've been listening more and more and more and over analyzing to the point of insanity, it always is funny to me when people like say Van Halen's an '80s band, given their start was in the '70s, because a lot of the Roth years weren't really '80s sounding. When you think of '80s, you don't think of "And the Cradle Will Rock" necessarily, because there's no chorus on it and there's no soaring multi-track guitars and huge drums. I think a lot of people get Van Halen wrong because they hear Jump and they hear and they hear anything from the Roth era and forget like that, like how 70s rooted that they were.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's a
Yeah, I'm
different
kind of
story.
like that. In my own head, I think of them as not '80s, but I discovered them in the '80s, so I think of them as
Yeah.
'80s. Not
Well,
necessarily sound wise, but you're right. I mean, they're 78.
you tend to I found that you tend to go towards the thing you find first. And Eruption was my first thing, so I love the first album. But like another thing is like Metallica. Metallica's fans are so different. You either like the Black Album or you like the early thrash metal stuff, and there's nothing in between. But like whatever you find first is usually what you like the most, because that's what got you started. And like I've had to understand that people started with OU812 and For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge and stuff like that, and not the first album and stuff like that, because it's such a far cry.
What's interesting about Van Halen, from my perspective, I discovered them in the early 80s, and we've discussed this many times, Tanner, on the show. We didn't have the internet back then, and we had a few guitar magazines, and Cream was the big music magazine that would have photographs of Van Halen. But it wasn't until later on, John, when we started getting some of these older photos. So it looked quite funny, looking at photos of the 70s Van Halen, where they're wearing flared jeans and platform shoes, because you look at that famous photo of Eddie when he's jumping with the Frankenstrat, and he's wearing those yellow pants and he's wearing sneakers, and it's just only a couple of years between those photos. So I think it's an interesting point about how Van Halen did this wonderful transition from 70s to the 80s. Not a lot of bands did that successfully, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Van Halen did it really well.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to mention that I was the one that synced the audio to the Niagara Falls concert.
Oh, you already did that. Nice,
man.
Yeah.
Nice.
Speaking of 70s Van Halen, I just remember in my introduction I probably should have said that, but I had it up and it had about 100,000 views until the original owner copyright striked it, got it taken down, and then stole it. And didn't credit me or Alan.
That's not up anymore.
Not my version. He uploaded the version of it. Whoever the fellow is, but he didn't. I commented. I said, must have been really hard copying, just stealing my video and uploading it, and not crediting me or Alan Garber, who helped kind of timestamp song by song.
Yeah. I can't imagine. That's a lot. That's a lot of work, man. Wow.
It was like 2 days straight of just like, because every clip was like 3 seconds long.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that happened. You guys did it. I mean, kudos, man. I don't know how. That's some cool right there, man.
Yeah. If you didn't think I was a nerd enough,
that's good job on that. I mean, that was great. Wow. Okay. Cool.
I'm we're talking about 70s and 80s Van Halen. I like to probably consider them a 70s band, because even though Van Halen probably looked cooler in the 80s, but I like to think of them as a 70s band, because the negative part of Van Halen in the 80s is they bred a lot of bad hair bands, you know what I mean? And I think we have to try to, as Van Halen fans, I mean, most knowledgeable music writers and things like that know that, even though they may blame Van Halen for that, they were not like that. All the hair bands with the Floyd Rose guitars and, like that kind of stuff. It's like, you can put some blame on Van Halen. And I think Eddie knew that and all that. And I still think that's why a lot of tapping isn't as acceptable in guitar playing. I think a lot of people stay away from it because those hair guys abused it so much and almost made it like it's a caricature type of thing and like a joke, which kind of sucks, because, I would like to see it incorporated a little bit more and just, thrown in just, nicely, into people's solos and, pop country music or whatever people listening to, you know what I mean? And I think I hopefully eventually that it does get adopted that way. So it's not just, I'm not saying go crazy, like, copying Eddie, but little bits and things, tasteful stuff like that added into, standard guitar playing would be nice. You know what I mean? But I don't know if that'll happen, because like I said, I think the hair era did a lot of damage to that, type of playing. But anyway, that's my thought.
You mean guys?
Andrew said.
Like me now?
What's that? What's that?
Andrew said something about magazines earlier, and I forgot to mention I bought this magazine for like $75.
Oh my
just because it has the those photos, the background I had earlier that has the pictures of 5150 and 85. They've been available on the internet here for a while now, but they're like horrible quality. Whoever scanned them probably scanned them in like 2004. So I got some good scans of the page on a really good computer, and really good, and so I could actually see what was going on in the pictures, because you can't really see what the drums are doing or the guitars or the keyboards and stuff. So
hey, it is Alan in the chat at all? Did Alan pop up? He's not.
No,
I was hoping he was going to be here tonight. We could have gotten him in here.
he's not popping in.
No. All right. Well, next time we'll have to have him, because he definitely. I know he interfaces with you a lot on this stuff, Tanner. Alan's, he gets involved in all this stuff. So I would like to have heard his, his thoughts on a lot of this stuff, if he had anything to add. But,
he's been transcribing. He's been transcribing interviews lately for. He just transcribed an interview from. What was Eddie's guitar? Rudy Liren. That's on the VH Links website. I think his I can't remember what his tag name is. It's like Garbage or something like that. GARBEAG or J. And it's pretty cool. He didn't like reveal that much new information about Ed's stuff, but it's cool to actually hear an interview with him.
Yeah, he's one guy that we need to speak to. Don Landy. We need to speak to Rudy, and Ken Dean is another one we were talking about. He'd be another good one to grab. Yeah. But so one thing before we wrap up real quick is a little bit of the Beat It information came out. I don't know, Tanner, Jimmy, did you hear about this? Andrew, did you hear about it?
No.
Okay. Tanner, you want to go?
I skimmed over it, but basically there's been a podcast called Stories in the Room, I believe it's called, about the Thriller.
Jeff Goebel, is he involved in that? I think that's his, right?
Jeff Goebel. No, it's a thriller. It's based on the recordings of Thriller, and it's got Greg Gaines, who was a keyboardist, a famous session player, was on it, and he comes in, and they've been talking about like the Linn drums and the synths and the stuffs for Thriller and stuff. And I think in the process of digging all this stuff up, they found the work order that says Eddie came in for one or two sessions or whatever on what day, and then
October 4th, 1982.
Jeff Goebel has been collecting all this information all in one post or whatever. It was pretty cool. It talked about how he rented an amp. People have been talking about this so-called rented Marshall and stuff like that, but I think Eddie said he used his Marshall or something like that. So.
A lot of people thought it was Alan Holdsworth. He was using a combo. I'm trying to think of what it was called.
Hartley Thompson
combo. That was a rumor for a long time.
Yeah.
But now we seem to have pretty definitive, because Andy Brower from Andy Brower Studio Rentals actually jumped in too and commented that he picked up Eddie in his 911 and drove him to Westlake Studios there for the session. And he said it was only about a half an hour when he was there with Eddie, and that was it. But and the guy who rented who Andy Brower said, hey, listen, you want to make money? Eddie's coming to do it. I need this amp. And he had a 69 Plexi, I guess. The guy says he still has it. I forget the guy's name.
I can't remember.
But we're going to hear more about this, I guess, in the future.
Yeah, well, there was a guy on Jeff's show, couple, because he does those Van Halen stories or whatever it's called. And, he said that his Marshall is the one that's on Beat It.
Yeah, and he says, was it him or I don't remember if it was him or Andy Brower, the Variac, and he showed a picture of the actual Variac.
Yeah.
He goes, he used my Variac on it, and he had a picture of that on there too. So, but now it's like I was talking to Chris Gill about it, and it's just now there's a lot of other questions going on about, now.
Lukather has a lot of stuff. Steve Lukather has a lot of stuff on this too, and he claims Eddie tracked it all at his studio and screwed up the alignment of the tape
SMPTE,
machine. Like,
the SMPTE code.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the SMPTE code is like a Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. It's just like the one track they dedicate to this like SMPTE code on there, but it's so you can like sync up. I think you could sync up another machine to it and stuff like that if you wanted more track. I forget what the whole thing was, but I guess when you cut that code, you're kind of screwed. And they said Eddie cut it. Some people say Don Landy cut it, but like Chris Gill was saying, the Bruce Swedian, he was the engineer for Thriller. He passed away apparently right after Eddie did, not long after. But he never really talked about that. He talked about the studio monitor going on fire. I guess that was his claim. But which apparently there's not a lot of evidence really that really happened either. There might have been a blown monitor or something. But anyway, there's like right. Jeff opened it all up, Keith. You're right. Now comes the editing rabbit hole, right? Because now it's a whole other can of worms open.
According to Lukather said, basically they had the whole track almost done. They just wanted to put Eddie's solo over it. They sent Eddie, and he said, "I hope it wasn't Don, because I hope Don wouldn't have cut the SMPTE code."
No, right. You wouldn't think he would, right?
So he rearranged the whole song because he probably wanted to make it more like rocking or whatever. Well, sent it back and it was all screwed up. And so Quincy Jones had Lukather and Jeff Porcaro fix it. And Steve said he played bass.
I think they went to Sunset and they fixed it at
Yes,
Sunset.
I think
apparently,
Porcaro Porcaro clicked out through the headphone bleed from Michael Jackson.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's insane.
Yeah, so Michael Jackson's headphones, you could hear the drums bleeding over of the finished track when he was on his vocal track. So they isolated that track, and Porcaro listened to the drum over Michael, the bleed out of his headphones. They're going into his vocal mic, and he was able to build a click track from that, which he played over and redid the whole drum track. And Lukather did the guitar and the bass track over it just to basically save it, because they wanted to use the original master tape they were using with Michael's original vocal tracks like on there. They didn't want to copy them and lose fidelity on them. So that was the only way they could have done it. And apparently, Porcaro was so good that he nailed it, pretty easily. But everything that Lukather has said about this is basically wrong or incorrect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
About
at least
every single thing about it. So, and then the fact is that on that sheet, that session sheet, Eddie would have had to have it was a union kind of gig. He would have been paid for that. And Eddie always said he was never paid for, maybe he meant he wasn't paid for any points on the album or anything like
royalties
that.
Or whatever.
Royalty like that. But he would have had to have been paid for the session. And like Chris Gill said, maybe he never cashed a check, you know what I mean? Or maybe, anybody Valerie could have cashed a check or something like that. But, there's probably more to this, but at least, it seems like we know that what it was now, whose amp it was. And then, like I said, Andy Brower, who I've never heard talk about it before, Andy Brower Studio Rentals, he was, for all this stuff was going on, back then, he was there for all that. And he chimed in and said, yeah, I was there. I drove him to the session and stuff like that. So, and it was October 4th, 1982, which is 5 days before the first time I ever saw the Van Halen in concert. So they went on tour like 2 days later on the East Coast. I think they played in either New Haven or your end of the woods, Jim, there. And I saw them up in Syracuse, New York on the 9th of October that year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so October 4th, yeah, you weren't even born yet, Tanner, right?
I wasn't even an idea. Actually, my mom wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, see, there you go. See, exactly.
Maybe I can't remember. I'd have to figure that out. But
I'm really showing my age here now, right? But yeah, so it was October 4th, 82. So that's
okay. So my mom was 4. Okay.
Okay, well, good. At least she was around at that point, right? Yeah, but so that's I guess to be continued that, but it's kind of a cool. All this stuff is good for like the historical record to kind of get it all straightened out. And that's why these people need to speak up. I'm glad Don Landy's involved in, overseeing the mastering of the Van Halen catalog here that's starting to happen. And I'm glad he's, overseeing it. So obviously he's involved. So hopefully he will speak at some point. But that's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, just give me a second, ladies and gentlemen. If you're watching a replay and you want to get in touch with everybody here that's on the stream, I'll attach Jimmy's social media links, John's social media links, and Tanner, please pass me, when we finish this live stream, please send them to me or to John, and John will pass them on so I can attach them to this video so that people can go and find you.
Yep.
What a fascinating conversation, gentlemen, for me to be part of personally. Fascinating.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Tanner. And listen, keep in touch. And obviously, any cool stuff, hit us up and let us know. Hit me up and let us know. And same with Alan. I mean, I wish Alan could have jumped in. I thought he would have been in the chat tonight.
John, we'll have to organise something and get Alan on. And Tanner and Jimmy, we'll have to come back and do
part 2 or something.
We've got to do part 2 on this because I know for a fact there's a lot of information, Tanner and John, that you've given us.
This is all that I know.
That's a lot of information to digest. So I'm sure. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people, Tanner and John and Jimmy, digesting this in the chat and on replay. Fascinating information.
Definitely. Yeah, and I'm sure Alan will have some thoughts on it too. So, just that guitar itself, that photo that you had was awesome. That the Kramer.
Oh yeah, I've never seen that before, man. Yeah, I gotta go back and still frame. I gotta go back and still frame that.
I can send it to anybody. Alan sent it to me because I asked. He said something about it in a comment somewhere. So I said, "Can you send that to me so I can talk about it on the show?"
The only thing with that is, though, if we take Eddie literally, like Alan's big on all that kind of stuff. Did he miss it? But Eddie said he never played a Kramer on a record. The
last thing I'll say is the one thing I noticed in this research was that Eddie is full of shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
100%.
It's almost cruel. It's almost cruel, and I'm like, really? You just lead people, and it's not his fault, but it's full of shit.
I know you don't know what to believe, but I think that's the way he wanted it.
I kind of think the guy enjoyed doing that. I kind of think he did, John.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you're telling people that he cranked up the Variac to 130 volts. Yeah, I think he enjoyed that when they ruined their amps, right?
Yeah, less guitar players to compete with.
Exactly, right? So, but yeah, thanks, Tanner, for everything, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, let us
know what you're up to.
I will.
Yeah. I'm just going to say one thing. You mentioned how all the drumming tracks on AU812 sucked. Mine or Mine's got a great drumming.
Oh, I love Mine. I do love Mine or Mine.
Come on, Mine or Mine's.
Yeah.
That saves the album.
It's true.
I agree.
I just wish that Mine or Mine was recorded 3 years later in that new drum room at 5150 3 years later when they added that on with the high ceiling. It would have sounded a lot better.
Jimmy, do you want to just give us some thoughts on this album from your perspective before we wind up the show? Give us some thoughts, some parting thoughts, Jimmy.
Okay, absolutely. All right. Well, this is going to sound a little superficial, but we haven't talked about this. The album art. I mean, come on. I remember being a little kid and walking past, Record Town, and they had it. They had like 12 copies out in front to catch your attention, and with my history, in '84, I was 16, but I couldn't drive yet. My birthday. That album was released in January. My birthday was in February, so I couldn't just get in a car and buy the album, and I wanted it so bad. And I remember like around that time, I was the president of my church's youth group, and we had this dance and stuff. And one of the prizes was 1984. And I didn't own it, and I wanted it so bad.
You rigged it. You rigged it. Tell us the truth.
Yeah, right.
To this day, I still think that artwork is incredible. You know, it's just incredible. You know,
I have to laugh because that the back cover, I have it the
yeah, that's my second favorite right there.
I laugh.
Hold it up, please, Tanner.
Sorry. Yep. With the writing, I love it, and I laugh because of the first when they did the first album and they had that the outtake cover. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's like they hate it because it was cheesy because they're just posing there. I think that is in the same vein as this. 6 years later, they gave into their.
The back cover is really 80s, but I just love the picture of that. There's nothing cool. He looks so cool there, right?
You know,
David with his shirt off and stuff. I mean, that's David Lee Roth right there.
You know, absolutely. You can get a lithograph of that album cover. They're from the artist, signed by the artist and numbered. She's doing that now, and it's great if you Google her. Her name is Margot, I think Nahas, Nahas, and she'll tell the story about how they looked at her portfolio because they wanted some kind of chrome naked women or something. That's what they wanted, and I guess she did some kind of chrome stuff, but I don't know. They didn't, obviously that didn't work out. So they looked at her portfolio. Can we see her portfolio? And they hit that, and they right away that was like, that's it right there. We want it. You know what I mean? So. And it just goes with the album. It's a masterpiece, that painting, and the album is a masterpiece.
And for me, yes, like what John just said, the album's a masterpiece, but it's got 3 even more masterpiece-full tracks on it, which we kind of ran down before, but Drop Dead Legs, Girl Gone Bad, and House of Pain for me. Those are 3. That's like the trifecta right there. We didn't really touch on it, but and I'll keep this short because I know we got to go. But like the second part of like House of Pain with the that is so sexy, man.
Yeah,
that playing, and when you got Dave back there, kind of like humming along, or oh my god, that's one of my favorite pieces on the album.
When you think about that part, Jimmy, it rides off into the sunset, and that's Van Halen.
You know what? You're right, man. That is kind of like that.
That's Van Halen, the original Van Halen, and we never ever got to really see them again. They did, Me Wise Magic and Can't Get the Stuff No More, 2 more songs, but that was it with Mike and Dave and Al and Ed. But that riding off into the sunset, as that thing fades out, I always think about it. That's the end of the classic Van Halen right there, And that album has something for everybody. It's got the pop songs, it's got the jams, the long tracks. It's got something for everybody. Experimental stuff, like jazzy, weird Holdsworth type of stuff. It's got a little bit of something for everybody on there.
Yeah,
perfect masterpiece, perfect album.
It is. It's a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's it.
Yeah, I agree. It's an album. It's an album that I have a little bit of melancholy about when I think about the album, because it's this album where this band could have just taken over the world, and that band could have gone on to do 2, 3, 4 other albums, but chose not to.
Read Ted's book about this. He has some opinions on whether they would have kept going if it wasn't for the Sammy, the push for Sammy.
Mm-hmm.
And then who would have thought the Sammy band would have taken off and gone off on the direction that they took with 5150. Fascinating. And I think this is one of the great things that we love about this band. We've got guys like Tanner and John, and Alan Garber and you, Jimmy, and we've got Keith Campbell, that just go and dig and do this archaeology, and they present, everyone's presenting this stuff here and on other channels and on other social media platforms. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
This is where the real work's been done, and it's just a shame that we can't get the authorities pitching in and joining us.
Yeah,
You know,
rubber stamping it.
the recognised authorities.
Yeah, you're right. But I'm happy. I don't mind the way Van Halen went after that. You know what I mean? I felt like I always say that they were just, you know, some things are just combustible. They were like a shooting star, and you know, they just like they had to implode. You know what I mean? From their it couldn't last. It had to just, you know,
Sure.
disintegrate because they burned too hot and too bright. And I feel like that's what happened in 1984. After that, they burned too hot and bright and disintegrated after that. And I'm cool with that because that 6-pack of the first 6 albums are just perfection. They're just like, I don't know any other band who put out 6 albums of that quality. You know what I mean? In that short period of time, it was just like that. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing.
Well, the Rolling Stones only did 5.
Yeah,
great
there you
albums
go.
in a row.
There you go. Right, right. But just and to think that you had, you know, you get off the road from touring and you had 2 weeks to record an album, and you know, on the back of the bus he's writing all the music for all this stuff, and how it came together. It's just like it's unheard of nowadays. People take 3 years to make an album. You know what I mean? It's crazy, and then the fact that, you know, we you know, say what you want about the Hagar years, but you know, Eddie got to branch out, and we got to see a complete other side of him. It wasn't like he wasn't still creative on guitar, but you know, the songwriting side came out too. And it's just like by the end of his career, I mean, their greatest hits album is legit, and not like one of these bands with 4 songs and the rest is filler on their greatest hits album. They have legitimately like 20. I mean, Little Guitars is one of their greatest songs, and it's not even on any of their greatest hits albums. And that song is like a staple of FM rock, you know, here in the United States. It's like that's everybody knows that song, and it's not even on either of their greatest hits packages. It's crazy. So I mean, at least Eddie, we got to see before his death the full kind of scope, really, of his musical abilities. You know, we would like to see more, but at least we got a taste of it. So I'm good with all that.
Awesome.
But
we're going to cruise, everybody. We're going to do a shout out to Landro, another young guy that's been on the channel, another Van Halen nut that's flying the flag that, you know, we all love to see and be part of. This club, this group of Van Halen nerds that we're in, that we're part of. I'm going to ask you, if you're watching a replay, please, at the end of this video, somewhere on this video, on the description, there's going to be everybody's social media links. Please go and subscribe to them. Do a shout out. Join whatever they've got. You guys are awesome. I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to be back here tomorrow with the Rock Professor and Brad. We're going to be ranking a Philip Sace album. I'm going to ask John for the last word, then Jimmy, and then Tanner. We're going to give you the last words, and we're going to cruise. John.
Yeah, go crank 1984 tonight before you go to bed. There you go.
Yeah. Jimmy.
My last word is pretty much my last words for every one of these shows that I'm on. Andrew, thank you for this outlet.
Yes.
It was very informative. I didn't know any of this stuff, you know, so I kind of kept quiet on some of it, on most of it. But you know, I learned a lot, and like I said, I had never seen that picture of that Kramer piece before. So hey, but you know, all in all, man, you know, this community is fantastic. Everybody in the chat, thank you. You know, thanks for caring. You know, thanks for caring about this channel. And Andrew, thanks for having this channel. That's it.
Definitely.
No problem. Thank you, brother. Tanner, you got the last words, brother.
Class dismissed.
Perfect.